Imagine sitting on a packed airplane, ready for a routine flight, when suddenly a stranger demands you be removed, not because of anything you did, but simply because of the color of your skin. This is the reality Amara Cole, a composed and resilient FBI agent, faces at 30,000 feet, in the confined, high-pressure space of a commercial flight. A moment of blatant racial discrimination ignites a chain reaction that will challenge power, privilege, and prejudice in ways no one expected. Who has the courage to stand firm when confronted with injustice so raw and personal? How does one woman's calm strength become a beacon for so many? What secrets and alliances lie hidden behind the polished facades of influence and corporate power? And how far will those threatened by truth go to silence it? This story is not just about one flight or one confrontation. It's about the battle for dignity, justice, and change, set against the claustrophobic tension of a plane, where every word, every glance, and every action carries weight. Join us as we uncover the struggles, the courage, and the unexpected turns that follow one unforgettable flight. If you're ready for a story that will grip your heart and open your eyes, hit that like button, share this video, and subscribe to our channel. Let's take off. The soft hum of the airplane's engines filled the cabin as it prepared to ascend into the thick evening sky. A few scattered passengers settled into their seats, the faint shuffle of luggage and low murmurs punctuating the quiet anticipation that comes with every flight. Amid the gentle glow of overhead reading lights and the cool recycled air, one figure stood out not because of loudness or flamboyance, but because of the calm, unshakable presence she carried with her. Amara Cole was no ordinary passenger. At 36 years old, she was an FBI special agent with nearly a decade of experience quietly navigating the complexities of justice and power. Her dark brown skin seemed to absorb the subtle warmth of the cabin lights as she slid into seat 3A, a window seat in the business class section of Meridian Air's Flight 742 bound for Washington, D.C. Her hair, worn in a neat low bun, framed a face marked by both serene focus and a lifetime of resilience. Tonight, her mission was simple: to get from point A to point B with as little distraction as possible. Yet, as the plane began to taxi down the runway, the undercurrents of tension she sensed could not be ignored. As Amara buckled her seatbelt, she noticed the man settling into 3C, the aisle seat next to her, casting occasional glances her way. Tall, impeccably dressed, with sharp blue eyes and a rigid posture. He seemed to carry a simmering impatience. She'd seen this type before, people who believed the world owed them something they had not earned. The flight attendant came by, offering drinks and menus. Amara politely declined anything but water, preferring to keep her senses clear. Her gaze briefly caught that of the attendant, a young woman with kind eyes who gave a small nod of recognition. Even in these small exchanges, Amara found reminders that the world was watching and connecting in quiet ways. The man beside her, whose name she learned was Charles Bentley, a wealthy businessman on his way to a high-profile conference, shifted uncomfortably as the plane climbed steadily into the night sky. Moments later, he leaned in, voice low but sharp. "You sure you're in the right seat?" he asked, eyes narrowing. Amara looked at him, unflinching. "This is my assigned seat," she replied evenly. His smirk deepened. "You sure? Because I think this is business class. Maybe you should be in economy." A flicker of surprise crossed the faces of nearby passengers, but Amara's expression remained steady. She could feel the weight of history in that moment, the countless times black professionals had been questioned, doubted, pushed aside. She reached calmly into her handbag and pulled out her FBI badge. flipping it open with deliberate clarity. Special Agent Amara Cole, FBI. This seat is assigned by the airline. The cabin seemed to still for a moment, the man's arrogance crashing against the undeniable truth of the badge in her hand. His face tightened, the smirk replaced by hesitation. "You don't belong here," he said quietly, more to himself than to her. "Actually, sir," Amara said with quiet authority, "I belong exactly where I'm supposed to be." The flight attendant, now fully alert to the unfolding situation, approached swiftly but cautiously. "Is everything all right here?" "Sir." Charles looked around, realizing the tide had turned. "She's in my seat." "No, sir," the attendant said firmly. "This is Ms. Cole's assigned seat. Please take your assigned place." Tension rippled through the cabin as passengers exchanged looks. Some faces showed support, others discomfort. It was a moment thick with the unspoken stories of exclusion, judgment, and resilience. Amara felt a quiet storm inside a rush of memories from earlier cases, the weight of responsibility pressing down harder than the airplane's altitude. She thought of her family, the sacrifices, the battles fought quietly away from public eyes. But this was different. This was immediate, personal, professional, all at once. Her mind briefly flicked to her younger brother, Marcus, who had faced similar subtle forms of discrimination in his corporate job. She recalled her mother's words from years ago, "Stand firm in your dignity, even when the world tries to chip away at it." The man finally muttered a grudging acceptance and moved to his correct seat. Amara exhaled slowly, the moment passing, but the implications lingering. This flight was no longer just a journey across states. It had become a battleground for respect, identity, and the simple right to be seen and heard without prejudice. The captain's voice broke through the cabin speakers, welcoming passengers and announcing an on-time departure. Amara gazed out the window as the city lights shrank beneath the plane, her thoughts spinning with the knowledge that the skies, like the ground, were far from neutral territory. She knew this flight would test more than just her patience. It would test her resolve, her empathy, and her unwavering commitment to justice, not just as an agent, but as a woman who refused to be diminished by ignorance or hate. As the beverage service began anew and passengers settled into their routines, Amara's phone buzzed quietly in her pocket. A text from her supervisor. "Keep your head up. This one's going to be tougher than most." She allowed herself a small, almost imperceptible smile. Justice was rarely easy, but it was always necessary. And tonight, she was ready. The cabin lights dimmed slightly as the meal service began. Amara adjusted her seat, the leather smooth under her fingertips. She noticed Charles Bentley across the aisle, his posture stiff and eyes still flicking in her direction. The tension had not fully dissipated. If anything, it had settled like a low fog over the space between them. Amara tried to focus on the soft hum of conversation around her, the clinking of utensils, the occasional laughter that rose and fell like waves. But her mind was elsewhere, turning over the earlier confrontation again and again. How many times had this played out before, in different places, with different faces? She was more than just a passenger tonight. She was a symbol, whether she liked it or not, of every person who had ever been asked to prove their right to exist in a space they had earned. Her thoughts drifted to her childhood. Growing up in Charlotte, North Carolina, she remembered her mother, Lillian, the school principal who had faced quiet resistance and outright hostility during the integration of local schools. Lillian had taught her and Marcus early on about dignity and strength, about the quiet power in standing tall even when the world wanted you to bow. Those lessons had stayed with Amara throughout her career, guiding her through moments like this one. Across the aisle, Charles Bentley's phone lit up, and for a moment, Amara caught a glimpse of his screen. An incoming message, no doubt, filled with the usual business jargon and urgent demands. She wondered if he ever saw the world beyond his spreadsheets and conference calls. Did he know what it felt like to fight for a seat on a plane, not just because it was your assigned place, but because it represented something deeper: recognition, respect, equality? As the flight attendant approached again, Amara requested the fruit plate, a light choice that matched her mood: somber, practical, but unyielding. The attendant smiled warmly, sensing the undercurrent of stress and offering a few words of kindness. It was a small gesture, but in this moment, it felt like a lifeline. Suddenly, a sharp voice cut through the cabin's subdued atmosphere. "Excuse me, miss, but I think you're causing a scene." It was Charles, loud enough to draw attention. He leaned forward, voice tinged with impatience and something darker. "This isn't how things work in business class. People like you usually know their place." A hush fell over the nearby rows as passengers turned to look. Amara's heart pounded, but her voice remained calm. "Sir, I have done nothing wrong. I am simply occupying the seat I was assigned. I am a federal agent on official business." She let the words hang in the air, the weight of her badge invisible but undeniable. Charles sneered. "Federal agent? You don't look the part. Are you sure you're not just trying to make trouble?" Her breath caught for a fraction of a second, a ripple of doubt threatening to surface, but she quelled it immediately. She had trained for moments like this, when prejudice came wrapped in veiled insults and outright hostility, when the world tried to rewrite her story based on assumptions and stereotypes. "I am exactly who I say I am. My credentials are valid, and so is my right to be here." Her tone was steady, but beneath it was the simmering frustration of countless similar confrontations. "Now, if you have a concern, I suggest you take it up with the airline staff." The flight attendant stepped in again, voice firm but polite. "Sir, please respect the other passengers. This isn't the time or place for personal disputes." Charles rolled his eyes and leaned back, muttering under his breath, but the atmosphere remained charged. Amara could feel the eyes of strangers on her, some filled with sympathy, others with discomfort or even judgment. The cabin was a microcosm of the world outside, full of people with their own biases, fears, and hopes. She closed her eyes for a moment, drawing in a slow breath. This was a test not just of patience, but of resilience. Her phone buzzed again, a quiet reminder of the messages piling up from her team on the ground. The Donovan case was still unfolding, and every minute spent here was time away from that fight. But there was no escaping the moment. This plane was now a stage for the larger battle she lived daily, a battle against a system that questioned her worth, that tried to diminish her before she even had a chance to prove herself. As she opened her eyes, a new voice joined the tension. A middle-aged woman in the row behind Charles spoke softly but clearly. "Sir, you're out of line. She's done nothing wrong. Maybe it's you who doesn't belong here." The woman's words carried a quiet strength, and for the first time, Amara noticed a ripple of support. A young man in the row across gave a subtle nod, his eyes meeting hers briefly with solidarity. Charles looked around, sensing the shift, his smirk fading. He muttered something about forgetting to check the passenger list, but said no more. The flight attendant, sensing the moment, made a subtle gesture to the cockpit to alert the captain discreetly. Amara's mind raced. She was grateful for the quiet allies, but she knew better than to rely on luck or goodwill alone. The incident had escalated beyond a simple seating dispute. It was a confrontation with deep-roots racial bias, entitlement, and the persistent struggle for dignity in spaces where it was often denied. She thought again of her badge, the symbol of authority she carried not just as an agent, but as a woman who had fought to be seen in a world that often looked away. She remembered the countless hours of training, the sacrifices made to walk this path, and the faces of those she had sworn to protect. Amara leaned back into her seat, eyes fixed on the small window beside her. The city lights below twinkled like distant stars, indifferent to the human dramas playing out in the cramped confines above. Her phone buzzed once more, this time with a text from Marcus. "Stay safe. You've got this. Remember why you fight?" A small smile tugged at the corners of her mouth. Marcus was always the steady one, the voice of reason when doubts crept in. She typed back a quick reply. "Thanks. It's tougher than usual tonight." As the plane cruised at 30,000 feet, Amara allowed herself a moment of vulnerability. The fight for justice was exhausting, lonely, and relentless. The anger simmered beneath the surface, the frustration at systems built to exclude and marginalize. But she was not alone. Not really. The passengers around her, the flight attendants, the quiet glances of support, they all formed part of a mosaic of change. And she, with her badge and her courage, was a catalyst. Suddenly, the captain's voice came over the intercom. "Ladies and gentlemen, we have been advised of a potential disturbance in business class. We ask for your cooperation and understanding as we manage the situation." The announcement sent a ripple through the cabin. Amara's pulse quickened. She knew this flight was far from ordinary now. It was a test of her strength, her resolve, and her ability to rise above the noise. Charles Bentley shifted again, his posture defensive, his eyes hardening. Amara straightened, the weight of the moment settling on her shoulders. She was not just a passenger. She was an agent of change, a beacon of dignity in a world too often blind to it. Her phone buzzed one final time before she silenced it. A message from her supervisor. "Keep your badge visible. Backup is en route." The flight was no longer about the destination. It was about standing firm, about being seen, about refusing to be erased. And Amara Cole was ready. The tension in business class was thick enough to cut with a knife. Amara's calm, composed demeanor seemed to only heighten the unease around her. Charles Bentley's eyes darted toward her every so often, a mixture of disbelief and simmering resentment. The flight attendants exchanged glances, sensing the storm beneath the surface, but unsure how far it would escalate. Amara knew she couldn't let this fester. Her presence here wasn't just about holding her seat. It was a statement. A refusal to be erased or diminished because of who she was. Her hand subtly brushed the lapel of her jacket where her FBI badge was concealed beneath the fabric. The badge was more than just a symbol. It was a shield, a reminder of the years of sacrifice, the battles fought in the shadows, and the promise she had made to protect the innocent. Charles cleared his throat loudly, drawing the eyes of several passengers. "Maybe you should just step out of here. Miss, this is not a place for people who cause trouble." A murmur rippled through the cabin. A few passengers shifted uncomfortably in their seats, some casting wary looks toward Amara, as if unsure whether to side with the man or the woman. Amara took a breath, steadying herself. She had faced hostility before, but never in such a public, intimate setting as this airplane cabin. The walls felt like they were closing in, but she refused to let that crack her resolve. "I am not causing trouble," she said evenly, voice low but firm enough for those nearby to hear. "I am simply doing my job." Charles scoffed. "Job? What job exactly?" She looked him directly in the eye, and then, slowly, reached inside her jacket and pulled out her badge. The glint of metal caught the light from the overhead panel. "Federal Bureau of Investigation," she said clearly, holding it up just enough for those around to see. "I am a special agent. I am on official business." The room fell silent. The collective breath of the passengers seemed to pause. Charles's face went pale, the confidence that had been building now crashing into shock and disbelief. One of the flight attendants stepped forward quickly, her tone now more authoritative. "Sir, you need to back down and allow Agent Cole to do her job." Charles's jaw clenched. His eyes flicked nervously around, catching the steely gazes of the other passengers who had begun to whisper among themselves. It was as if the badge had shifted the power balance in an instant. Amara felt the surge of adrenaline mixed with relief. The badge was her voice, her shield, her undeniable proof that she belonged in this seat, in this cabin, in this world. Yet beneath her calm exterior, doubts flickered. Would the badge be enough? Had she underestimated the depth of the animosity? How far would Charles go to remove her? Her mind raced back to her training, to the lessons drilled into her about conflict de-escalation and authority presence. She reminded herself that control was a delicate dance. One wrong step could make the situation spiral. Charles swallowed hard, then straightened, trying to regain some semblance of composure. "Fine. You win. Agent. But don't expect me to forget this." His words were a thinly veiled threat, but Amara was prepared. She held her badge up once more, a quiet declaration. "I'm not going anywhere." Several passengers clapped quietly, their support clear. A young woman across the aisle smiled at Amara, mouthing "thank you." Another man nodded, his expression one of quiet respect. The flight attendant returned, now with the captain at her side. The captain's expression was serious but measured. "Agent Cole, we appreciate you identifying yourself. We've informed ground security at our destination and will ensure your safety." "Sir," he addressed Charles, "this situation is under control. Please remain seated and respect all passengers." Charles muttered something under his breath, but sank back into his seat, defeated for the moment. Amara exhaled slowly. The immediate threat diffused, but her alertness sharpened. The flight still stretched ahead, and she knew this was only the beginning. She felt a tap on her shoulder and turned to see Marcus, her younger brother, who had quietly boarded during a stopover to offer support. His presence was a balm, a reminder she wasn't alone. "How are you holding up?" he asked quietly, eyes scanning the cabin. Amara smiled faintly. "Better now." "That badge saved the day." Marcus nodded. "It's more than just a piece of metal, isn't it?" "Yeah," she agreed. "It's a reminder of everything I fought for, not just for me, but for all the people who look like me and deserve to be seen." The conversation was interrupted as a fellow passenger approached, a middle-aged black man with a calm, steady presence. He introduced himself as Marcus Reed. "I just want to say thank you for standing your ground," he said earnestly. "It takes courage, especially in a space where people are quick to judge." Amara felt a warmth spread through her chest. The support was unexpected, but deeply needed. They spoke briefly about the challenges of navigating predominantly white spaces and the weight of representation. As the flight continued, Amara felt the eyes of many passengers on her, some curious, some admiring, others hesitant. The viral nature of the incident was palpable even in the confined cabin. Her phone vibrated again. This time a message from her supervisor, backup ETA 20 minutes. Stay vigilant. She tucked the phone away, but the reminder was a steady drumbeat in the back of her mind. Amara's thoughts turned inward. She reflected on the countless times she had questioned her own strength, her own worth in a system that seemed stacked against her. There were days when the burden felt too heavy, the microaggressions, the dismissals, the outright hostility. But moments like this, standing firm in the face of blatant racism, reminded her why she continued to fight. She was more than just an agent. She was a beacon of change. Her gaze drifted to the window, watching the clouds pass by in slow motion. She thought about the journey ahead, not just this flight, but the long road of justice she was committed to. The flight attendants resumed their service, offering drinks and smiles that felt sincere, despite the earlier tension. Amara accepted a cup of tea, savoring the warmth as a small comfort. Suddenly, the cabin lights flickered briefly, and a murmur spread. The turbulence had started. Passengers gripped armrests and exchanged nervous glances. Amara steadied herself, reminded that this flight, like her mission, was filled with unpredictable moments. Her phone buzzed once more, a call this time from a colleague on the ground. "Agent Cole, we have eyes on the situation from here. Security teams are ready." She nodded, knowing the battle was far from over. The rest of the flight was a delicate balance of watchfulness and composed professionalism. Amara stayed alert, her badge a quiet promise that she would not be moved. When the plane finally touched down, the waiting security team greeted her with nods of respect and efficiency. As she stepped off the plane, flanked by officers, Amara felt a surge of quiet triumph. Tonight, she had stood firm, shown the power of dignity, and reminded the world that no seat, no space, no place was off limits. Her fight was far from over, but this was a victory, a moment of justice in a world that so often denied it. The airport terminal buzzed with movement and noise, but to Amara Cole, it felt like a bubble that both separated her from and connected her to the chaos of the world outside. She walked steadily through the crowd, flanked by the security detail now assigned to her for the remainder of the trip. The protective presence was reassuring, yet a stark reminder of how fraught her daily life had become. Her mind was a whirl of thoughts. The confrontation on the plane, the standoff with Charles Bentley, the way the badge had shifted the tide in mere seconds. It all felt surreal. She remembered the flicker of shock on Bentley's face, the hesitant compliance that came only after she revealed her FBI credentials. It was a powerful moment, but it also underscored the tension she lived with daily, how her identity as a black woman could trigger hostility, no matter her rank or accomplishments. Amara had spent her life learning to navigate spaces that weren't designed for her, fighting invisible battles even before stepping into her role as a federal agent. Yet, this incident felt different. It was public, it was raw, it was personal. She had barely settled into the rented car that awaited her when her phone buzzed again. The message was from her supervisor. "Situation evolving. Media has picked up the incident. Prepare for increased attention. Maintain low profile where possible." Amara exhaled deeply. The spotlight was inevitable. She knew that, but she also understood that visibility could be a double-edged sword, offering a platform for change, but inviting scrutiny and criticism. The drive to the hotel was quiet. The streets of the city illuminated by streetlights and the occasional flicker of neon signs. Marcus sat beside her, offering silent support. His presence was a steadying force she had come to rely on. At the hotel, Amara immediately retreated to the privacy of her room. She needed to process everything to center herself before the waves of the coming days. The incident was no longer just about one passenger or one flight. It was a microcosm of systemic issues, racial prejudice, entitlement, power imbalances that played out daily across the country. Sitting by the window, watching the city pulse below, Amara allowed herself to feel the weight of the moment. There was anger, sharp and hot, born from years of witnessing injustice. There was sadness for the countless others who faced similar indignities without the shield of a badge. And there was resolve, fierce and unwavering. She pulled out her journal, an old habit from her training days, and began to write. Today, I was reminded that even with authority, even with credentials, I am not immune to the biases that plague this society. The badge commands respect, yes, but it also exposes fault lines, the fragility of tolerance in the face of deeply ingrained prejudice. Her pen paused as a wave of exhaustion washed over her. The exhaustion of constant vigilance, the burden of representation. She wrote on, but today also showed me the power of standing firm, of claiming space unapologetically. The seats we occupy, the roles we play, they matter, not just for us, but for those who come after, for the voices still silenced. Later that evening, a knock came at the door. Marcus entered, carrying 2 cups of tea. He handed her one and sat down beside her. "You handled that well," he said quietly. "You always do." Amara smiled faintly. "It's not always easy." Marcus nodded knowingly. "I know, but that's why you're here to remind people that they can't push us out, that we belong." Their conversation drifted to the upcoming days, the media storm, the inevitable inquiries, the personal toll. Amara confessed her worries about how the incident might be twisted or weaponized. Marcus assured her that they would face it together, that her family and friends were her strength. That night, sleep was elusive. Amara's mind replayed the moments in the cabin, the tension, the stares, the silence that followed her badge's reveal. She reflected on the countless agents she had trained with, the sacrifices they made, and the battles that never made headlines. The following morning, news reports began to surface online and on television. Headlines varied, some sympathetic, highlighting the injustice Amara faced, others questioning her conduct or focusing on the disruption caused. She watched a clip of the confrontation, her composed voice calm but firm as she stated her case. The raw humanity in her eyes contrasted sharply with the cold professionalism of the opposing passenger. As calls and messages flooded in, Amara realized the importance of controlling the narrative. She coordinated with her public affairs office, preparing to speak publicly, not just about the incident, but about the broader issues it illuminated. Her phone rang. It was Elena Martinez, a journalist known for thoughtful coverage of social justice issues. "Agent Cole," Elena began warmly, "I want to help tell your story, to shed light on what this means beyond the headlines. Are you willing to talk?" Amara considered for a moment. Media exposure was risky but necessary. "Yes, but only if we focus on the systemic issues, not just the incident." The interview was scheduled for later that day. In the hours before, Amara met with Marcus and a close circle of trusted friends. They discussed the power of her story, the responsibility that came with it, and the need to be strategic. "It's about more than just me," she emphasized. "It's about every person who's been made to feel invisible or less than because of their race or background," Marcus added, "and showing the world that standing up matters." The interview was intimate and honest. Amara spoke not just as an agent, but as a woman who had navigated layers of prejudice and emerged resilient. She shared stories of her childhood, her early career, and the moments that shaped her. Elena's questions were thoughtful, allowing Amara to express vulnerability without sacrificing strength. When the piece aired, it resonated widely. Messages of support poured in from across the country. For many, Amara became a symbol of dignity in the face of adversity. Yet, alongside the support were whispers of backlash, skepticism, and attempts to undermine her credibility. In the quiet moments, Amara grappled with self-doubt. Was she prepared for this kind of public scrutiny? Could she maintain her focus amid the noise? She sought refuge in meditation and the wisdom passed down from her mother, the lessons about staying grounded, the power of calm, the strength found in compassion. A text arrived from her supervisor. "Your resilience is commendable. We stand with you. This is just the beginning." That message was a lifeline. Amara also began to reflect deeply on the intersections of her identity, the black woman, the federal agent, the family member, the advocate, how these facets sometimes conflicted, but ultimately formed her whole. She recalled conversations with older mentors who had paved the way, reminding her that progress was a relay, not a sprint. Days turned into a week, and Amara prepared for the next flight home. The challenges were far from over. Investigations into the incident, questions from her agency, and the unrelenting media spotlight awaited. But Amara was different now. She was transformed by the experience, more resolved, more connected, more visible. As she boarded the plane once more, the memories of the confrontation lingered, but no longer weighed her down. She was ready. The weeks following the flight incident felt like navigating through a storm that refused to calm. Amara Cole found herself at the eye of a growing media frenzy that twisted facts and emotions alike. Despite the chaos, she held to a steady course, anchored by her purpose and the unwavering support of her family and colleagues. Her days began early, often before sunrise, as she reviewed case files and prepared for the inevitable inquiries. The Bureau was scrutinizing every detail, weighing the incident's impact on public trust and internal morale. Some questioned her judgment, others rallied behind her, recognizing the courage it took to confront bias head-on. One afternoon, Amara sat in a conference room at headquarters, surrounded by a panel of supervisors and legal advisors. The room's sterile walls seemed to close in, but she met each gaze with calm determination. "Agent Cole," her supervisor began, voice measured, "the department appreciates your professionalism during this difficult time. However, there are concerns about the public nature of this incident. We need to ensure future engagements maintain operational security and minimize exposure." Amara nodded slowly, understanding the delicate balance between transparency and discretion. "I agree," she replied, "but I also believe visibility in this case is critical. This isn't just about one flight or one passenger. It's about systemic issues that affect countless individuals." A legal advisor interjected, "The Bureau must weigh the risk of public scrutiny against operational effectiveness. High-profile incidents can invite political pressure and complicate investigations." Amara took a breath. "I'm prepared to cooperate fully with any review, but I ask that the Bureau also consider the broader message. Standing silent in the face of discrimination only perpetuates the problem." The room fell silent for a moment before her supervisor spoke again. "Noted. We will take your perspective into account. In the meantime, maintain focus on your assigned duties." The meeting concluded with polite nods, but Amara sensed the underlying tension. Her role was both a shield and a spotlight, a paradox she had learned to navigate over years in the field. Outside the office, the world continued to turn. News cycles churned out articles and opinion pieces. Social media flooded with support and criticism. For Amara, the most meaningful messages came from those who shared their own stories, people inspired by her strength to speak out against injustices they had suffered quietly for too long. One evening, as she returned to her hotel room, her phone buzzed with a video message from an activist group she had connected with earlier. "Agent Cole," a woman's voice began. "Thank you for your bravery. Your story is helping us build momentum for change. We would like to collaborate on a public awareness campaign about racial bias in air travel and beyond." Amara watched the message twice, feeling a swell of hope. This was the kind of impact she had hoped for, not just personal vindication, but a spark that could ignite broader societal change. She called Marcus immediately, eager to share the news. "They want to make this bigger," she said. "Not just about me or that flight, but about every person who's been pushed aside or dismissed because of who they are." Marcus smiled warmly over the phone. "That's powerful. Amara, you've turned a moment of conflict into a movement." In the following days, Amara worked closely with the group, lending her voice and expertise. They crafted messages that highlighted the everyday realities of discrimination, microaggressions, implicit biases, structural inequities, and framed them within the context of dignity and respect. Yet the tide was not entirely in her favor. On several occasions, Amara encountered resistance from corporate entities worried about reputational damage, from public figures uncomfortable with the spotlight, and from anonymous online trolls intent on sowing doubt. During one particularly difficult moment, she found herself reflecting deeply on her journey. Sitting in a quiet corner of a city park, Amara watched children playing and families gathering. The simple joy of these scenes contrasted sharply with the complexity of the battles she faced. She wondered how many of those children would grow up encountering the same barriers she had. How many would need to summon strength she sometimes doubted she had. Her journal came out again, her pen tracing thoughts she couldn't speak aloud. The path to justice is fraught with resistance. Every step forward is met with counterforce. Yet, surrender is not an option. The fight is not only for me, but for those unseen, unheard, for those who deserve a chance to breathe freely in spaces that should belong to them. The following week, Amara was invited to testify before a congressional committee examining racial bias in transportation industries. The hearing was televised, watched by millions. It was an opportunity to bring hard truths to light and push for legislative reforms. Nervous but resolute, Amara prepared meticulously. She practiced her testimony, anticipating tough questions and hostile interruptions. Marcus and her mentor, Special Agent Dana Brooks, provided counsel and encouragement. On the day of the hearing, Amara arrived early at the Grand Government Building. The ornate chambers were filled with officials, reporters, and advocates. The weight of history was palpable. Taking the stand, she began her testimony with clarity and grace. "Thank you for the opportunity to speak today," she said. "My experience on that flight was a stark reminder of the challenges that persist in our society. While I was fortunate to have a badge that commanded respect, many do not. The prejudices that played out in that cabin are not isolated incidents. They are reflections of systemic issues that demand our collective attention." She recounted the incident calmly, emphasizing the human dignity at stake rather than the sensationalism. "I stood firm not just as an agent, but as a woman who has faced these biases throughout her life. What happened to me could happen to anyone. It is imperative that we enact policies that protect passengers from discrimination and hold individuals and corporations accountable. Questions followed, some supportive, others confrontational. Amara answered each with professionalism, refusing to be rattled. Her testimony was widely praised. Advocacy groups hailed it as a breakthrough moment. Legislative aides began drafting bills inspired by her recommendations, focusing on training for airline staff, stronger reporting mechanisms for discrimination, and increased oversight. Back in her hotel room that evening, Amara allowed herself a moment of quiet pride. The long hours, the battles, the doubts, they all felt worth it. But she also recognized the road ahead would be long. Change rarely came swiftly. There would be setbacks, resistance, and moments of despair. Yet, this was the work she was called to do. As she prepared for the next flight, Amara's thoughts turned to the future. How could she continue to leverage her voice and position to uplift others? How could she ensure that the lessons from this incident led to lasting transformation? She made a silent vow to remain steadfast, to listen deeply, and to lead with empathy and strength. Outside the window, the city lights shimmered, a mosaic of stories intertwined, stories waiting to be heard and changed. The days after the congressional hearing brought a whirlwind of activity, both exhilarating and exhausting. Amara Cole found herself caught between the public eye and the demands of her bureau responsibilities. The media spotlight burned brighter, social media buzzed with discussions, and advocacy groups reached out for guidance. Yet amid the external noise, a quiet storm brewed within her, a struggle of doubt, fatigue, and the weight of expectation. On an early Monday morning, Amara sat at a small cafe near the bureau's field office. The steam from her coffee curled upward, a small comfort in the chill of the city's spring air. Her phone buzzed with messages from allies, friends, and her family, each one a reminder of the stakes she carried. Despite the encouraging words, a gnawing question lingered in her mind. Was she truly making a difference? Or was she merely a symbol in a story that would soon fade? Her thoughts were interrupted by a call from Marcus. "How are you holding up?" he asked gently. "I'm managing," she replied honestly. "But some days, it feels like the harder I push, the more resistance I face, like I'm banging my head against a wall that keeps getting higher." Marcus chuckled softly. "That's the nature of change, sis. It's slow and messy, and it wears you down. But remember why you started. You're not alone in this fight." She smiled at his words, drawing strength from the bond they shared. "Thanks, Marcus. I needed that." After hanging up, Amara turned her attention to the thick stack of documents waiting on the cafe table, new policy proposals, training materials for airline personnel, and draft legislation inspired by her testimony. The progress was tangible, but so were the challenges. The following days brought both victories and setbacks. A major airline announced plans to overhaul its diversity and inclusion training. Another introduced a confidential hotline for passengers to report discrimination without fear of retaliation. These changes were steps forward, small but significant. Yet, at the same time, Amara encountered subtle pushback. An influential industry lobbyist dismissed her efforts as overreach and political theater. Certain political figures questioned the necessity of additional regulations, framing them as burdensome to business. Within the Bureau, whispers circulated. Some colleagues admired her courage. Others viewed the publicity as a liability. Amara felt the tension keenly during team meetings, where her suggestions met with polite skepticism. One afternoon, Amara met with Special Agent Dana Brooks in a quiet conference room. Dana had been her mentor since day one, a steady presence amid turbulent waters. "You're carrying a lot," Dana observed, her eyes kind but firm. "It's okay to admit when you're struggling." Amara nodded slowly. "Sometimes I wonder if I'm doing enough or just playing a part in a bigger show. The backlash, the politics, it's exhausting." Dana leaned forward. "Change is never easy, especially when it threatens established interests. But your work has opened doors that were previously shut. You're laying groundwork others will build on." Amara considered this. "I want to believe that. I do, but the doubts are hard to silence." "You're not alone," Dana reassured her. "And remember, your strength is not just in fighting, but in knowing when to rest and recharge. The people counting on you need you whole." That evening, Amara returned to her apartment, the familiar quiet both a refuge and a reminder of the solitude that often accompanied her path. She pulled out her journal, letting her pen move freely across the pages. "I feel the weight of eyes on me, the expectations of many, yet inside, the same fears that visited me years ago. Am I enough? Will this change anything? The answers are unclear, but I must keep walking forward, for those who cannot." Her phone buzzed again, a message from a young woman named Lila, who had reached out after seeing Amara's testimony. "Thank you for speaking up. Your story gave me courage to share my own. I hope one day no one has to endure what you did." Amara smiled, the small acts of connection fueling her resolve. The next day brought a surprise and invitation to speak at a national conference on civil rights and social justice. The event promised a platform to broaden the conversation beyond air travel, connecting the dots between discrimination, policy, and cultural change. Amara accepted, viewing it as an opportunity to inspire others and build coalitions. As she prepared her speech, she grappled with the complexities of her message. She wanted to be honest about the pain and challenges, but also hopeful. The balance was delicate. In her hotel room the night before the conference, she sat by the window, city lights twinkling below. The world felt vast and unknowable. Her mind drifted to the flight that had changed everything. The tension in the cabin, the sharp words, the moment she flashed her badge, the faces of passengers watching, some with disdain, others with silent support. She recalled her internal dialogue that day, the instinct to remain calm, the surge of anger at injustice, the deep well of empathy for those who suffer silently. The memory stirred a familiar internal struggle: how to harness strength without losing compassion, how to remain firm yet open, how to lead without becoming hardened. Her phone chimed softly, a message from Marcus. "Remember who you are. The world needs your light, even when the night feels long." She typed a quick reply. "Thanks, brother. I'll carry that with me." The morning of the conference arrived crisp and clear. Amara stepped onto the stage before an audience of activists, academics, policymakers, and everyday citizens. The applause was warm but measured. She began with a story, a human story of dignity and resilience. "I'm here because one day on a plane, I was forced to confront not just one man's prejudice, but a system that allows bias to persist. That day, I chose to stand firm, not just for myself, but for everyone who has ever been made to feel less than they are." Her voice was steady, her eyes meeting those in the crowd. "We must recognize that discrimination is not confined to a single moment or place. It permeates our institutions, our workplaces, our communities. It affects health, opportunity, justice." Amara outlined practical steps, policy reforms, education, accountability measures, but also emphasized the need for empathy and dialogue. Change begins when we see each other fully, beyond assumptions and stereotypes. It requires courage to confront uncomfortable truths and humility to listen. She paused, letting the words settle. I know this journey is long and difficult. There will be setbacks and resistance, but together, we can build a future where respect and dignity are not privileges, but rights. The crowd rose in applause. Some moved to tears, others inspired to action. After the speech, Amara mingled with attendees, hearing stories that echoed her own and witnessing the power of shared experience. Later that evening, back in her hotel room, she reflected on the day's impact. The road ahead was uncertain, but moments like this reminded her why she fought. Her phone buzzed again. This time, an encrypted message from a trusted source within the Bureau. Heads up, Donovan's legal team is mobilizing. Expect renewed efforts to discredit the case and possibly intimidate key witnesses. Amara's heart tightened, the familiar shadows creeping in. She closed her eyes briefly, grounding herself. The fight was far from over, but neither was her resolve. Back at the Bureau's field office in Philadelphia, Amara Cole sat at her desk, the soft hum of computers and murmurs of agents creating a familiar backdrop to her thoughts. The encrypted message she had received the previous night lingered heavily in her mind. Donovan's legal team was mobilizing, the shadows of resistance growing ever darker. She glanced around the room, noting the focused faces of her team analysts poring over evidence, agents preparing witness statements, legal advisors drafting responses. The machinery of justice was in motion, but so was the machinery of opposition. Her phone buzzed again. This time it was a message from her supervisor, Special Agent Carter. Amara, we need to talk. Conference room in 10. With a deep breath, she rose, steadying herself. She knew these meetings often brought difficult news or strategic shifts, but today's urgency suggested something more immediate. Inside the conference room, a small group awaited Carter, legal counsel, and a few senior investigators. The atmosphere was tense but professional. Thanks for coming so quickly, Carter began. We've received intelligence indicating the Donovan's team is launching a coordinated campaign to undermine the credibility of our key witnesses. There may be attempts to intimidate or discredit them. Amara nodded, her jaw tightening. We anticipated pushback, but this seems escalated. Exactly, Carter confirmed. We need to enhance witness protection and review all security protocols immediately. The room buzzed with rapid discussion about logistics, communication channels, and contingency plans. Amara's mind raced, weighing the risks to her team and the families they represented. Later that day, Amara sat down with Sarah Jenkins, a mother whose son had tragically succumbed to opioid addiction. Sarah's vulnerability was palpable, but so was her quiet strength. I want to support this case, Sarah said, voice wavering. But the thought of being targeted, of having my family dragged into this, it's terrifying. Amara reached out, placing a comforting hand over Sarah's. You are not alone. We will do everything to protect you. Your courage is the foundation of justice. The conversation stayed with Amara as she returned to her office. The stakes had never felt more real. This was no longer just an investigation. It was a battle for truth against entrenched power. That evening, she found herself wandering to the rooftop terrace of the Bureau building. The city stretched beneath her, lights twinkling in the dusk. She took a deep breath, trying to steady the restless storm inside. Her thoughts turned inward. The weight of responsibility pressed down, mingled with the weariness of relentless confrontation. Was she strong enough to carry this? Did the pursuit of justice justify the personal sacrifices? The image of that fateful flight resurfaced the hushed tension in the cabin. The hostile glances, the moment she revealed her badge. How many times had she replayed that instant in her mind, wondering if she could have handled it differently? Her phone buzzed again. This time, a text from Marcus. Thinking of you. Remember, even storms pass. She smiled, grateful for the reminder. The next morning, the Bureau convened a briefing. Amara presented the updated security measures, emphasizing the importance of vigilance and communication. We're not just protecting evidence, she said firmly. We're protecting lives, voices that must be heard. The days that followed were a blur of activity. Amara juggled interviews, media inquiries, and strategic meetings. The public's interest surged, fueled by social media campaigns and advocacy efforts. One afternoon, while reviewing case files, Amara received an unexpected visitor. Deputy Director Elena Ramirez from headquarters. Known for her unwavering commitment to justice, Ramirez had a reputation for cutting through bureaucratic red tape. Agent Cole. Ramirez greeted warmly, but with unmistakable authority. I've been following your work closely. You're making waves. Amara stood, extending her hand. Thank you, ma'am. I appreciate your support. Ramirez smiled. I wanted to discuss resource allocation. Your case has national implications, and we want to ensure you have what you need to succeed. The conversation turned to staffing, legal assistance, and security enhancements. Ramirez's presence was a powerful affirmation of the case's importance. Later that week, Amara found herself invited to a private meeting with Senator Olivia Monroe, a vocal advocate for health care reform and a key ally in the fight against the opioid crisis. Monroe's office was understated but elegant, walls lined with books and photographs of community events. The senator's gaze was steady as she welcomed Amara. I've been inspired by your testimony and your commitment, Monroe said. The system has failed too many, and your work is changing the conversation. Amara shared insights from the investigation, highlighting the systemic issues that allowed corporate misconduct to flourish. We need to move beyond rhetoric to real policy change, Monroe declared, and that means bipartisan support, grassroots mobilization, and accountability at every level. The meeting energized Amara. It was a reminder that the fight was not hers alone, but a collective endeavor. Yet amid these victories, doubt continued to gnaw. That night, back in her apartment, she stared at the ceiling, thoughts swirling. Was justice truly attainable in a system so deeply intertwined with power and influence? Could one investigation dismantle decades of systemic neglect? The questions circled like vultures, threatening to erode her resolve. But then she recalled a phrase her mentor Dana Brooks had once shared. Strength is not the absence of doubt, but the courage to face it. Amara reached for her journal, writing with renewed determination. The path is long and fraught with shadows, but each step forward is a beacon for those who cannot walk this road themselves. I will carry their stories, their pain, and their hope armor against despair. The following morning brought a critical development. A whistleblower from within Donovan Pharmaceuticals contacted the Bureau anonymously, offering new evidence that could expose deeper layers of deception. The information detailed internal memos and emails revealing deliberate strategies to downplay addiction risks, to manipulate regulatory agencies, and to silence dissenting voices within the company. Amara and her team pored over the documents, the weight of the revelations settling over them. This was the breakthrough they needed, but it also intensified the dangers. The stakes had risen. As Amara prepared to present the findings to the prosecuting attorneys, she felt the familiar mix of excitement and trepidation. This case was no longer just about one company or one man. It was about the entire system that enabled such harm to persist. She thought of Sarah, of the families, of every silent victim. The fight was far from over, but now the tide was turning. The sun rose pale over Philadelphia as Amara Cole sat quietly in the briefing room. The air was thick with anticipation and the low murmur of her team's whispered conversations. Then, each person had been handed a thick dossier filled with the new whistleblower evidence. It was a moment of fragile hope and heightened risk. Amara studied the documents closely. The internal memos painted a damning picture: emails where company executives discussed minimizing reports of addiction. Memos instructing sales teams to emphasize the benefits while sidestepping the dangers. And recorded instances where scientists and doctors who raised concerns were silenced or reassigned. The company had crafted a web of deception so intricate that unraveling it would take time and skill. She could feel the weight of responsibility settle heavier on her shoulders. Every line of the documents was a story of lives affected, families shattered, and a system rigged to protect profit over people. Yet here was proof, a breakthrough that might finally hold the powerful accountable. Her thoughts flickered back to the plane, to that intense moment when she revealed her FBI badge to silence a racist passenger. That flash of courage had not only sparked a viral sensation, but had also turned the tide of this investigation. Yet beneath the public attention was a quieter, more dangerous fight, one waged in shadow, where threats were whispered and trust was a fragile currency. Later that day, Amara convened a secure video call with the prosecuting attorneys and her closest investigative team members. The mood was serious as she summarized the new evidence. The legal team was visibly energized, but cautioned that this would mean a much tougher battle ahead. Donovan's lawyers would dig deep, aiming to discredit the whistleblower and the entire investigation. "This is where we prepare for the long haul," Amara said, her voice steady but with a hint of weariness. "They will fight hard to protect their interests. We must be ready for aggressive countermeasures." Her team nodded. The weight of their commitment was visible in their eyes. This was more than a case. It was a mission. In the following days, Amara found herself navigating an exhausting schedule filled with interviews, forensic analysis, and strategic meetings. Yet amid the professional demands, there was the constant undercurrent of personal reflection. How much could she push before the costs became unbearable? The pressure of public scrutiny, threats against her and her family, and the emotional toll of the victims' stories were relentless. One evening, after a particularly grueling day, Amara returned to her modest apartment. The city's nightscape stretched beyond her window, a jumble of lights flickering against the darkness. She sank into her worn leather chair, exhaustion threatening to overwhelm her. Her phone buzzed. It was a text from Marcos. "Remember, you are not alone. We all stand with you." A small smile tugged at her lips. Family had become her anchor in this storm, grounding her when doubts surged. Yet even their support could not quiet the voice inside her that whispered questions. Was this battle worth the toll it exacted? Could justice truly prevail against the machinery of power that night as sleep eluded her? Amara sat with her journal, wrestling with her thoughts. In the quiet, the doubts rise like shadows. I question my strength, my choices, but I also know that these doubts are the price of caring deeply. To fight for justice is to carry the weight of all who cannot fight for themselves. Her phone rang suddenly, breaking the stillness. It was Deputy Director Elena Ramirez. "Amara, we have a situation. The whistleblower's identity has been compromised. There's a potential threat to their safety." The news hit like a thunderclap. Amara sat upright, heart pounding. Protecting this person was now paramount. Within the hour, security protocols were intensified. The Bureau's protective detail worked swiftly to relocate the whistleblower to a secure location. Amara coordinated closely with field agents, ensuring that every precaution was taken. Despite the urgency, she felt the familiar chill of fear, not for herself, but for those who risked everything to bring truth to light. Over the next several days, the pressure mounted. Donovan's legal team unleashed a media campaign aimed at discrediting the investigation. Anonymous sources cast doubt on the whistleblower's credibility. Lobbyists worked behind the scenes to influence key political figures. It was a calculated assault designed to fracture the coalition Amara had painstakingly built. But amid the chaos, a quiet resilience grew. Victim advocacy groups rallied public support. Social media amplified stories of those affected. And within the Bureau, Amara's team deepened their commitment. One afternoon, during a rare moment of calm, Amara found herself on a video call with Sarah Jenkins. The mother's voice was soft but resolute. "We have to keep fighting. Agent Cole, for every family who suffered, for the future." Amara nodded, eyes misting. "I promise. Sarah, we won't let you down." That evening, as she prepared to leave the office, Amara received an encrypted message from an unknown source. It contained detailed intelligence about covert lobbying efforts and back-channel communications between Donovan's allies and regulatory officials. The information was explosive. It suggested that the corruption extended far beyond what they had imagined. Yet the sender was anonymous, raising questions about motives and trust. Amara knew that every piece of evidence would be scrutinized, challenged, or dismissed. She also knew that the only way forward was to keep pushing no matter the cost. The next day, a major development shook the investigation. The whistleblower agreed to give a recorded deposition under protective custody. This was a turning point. Their testimony promised to expose the inner workings of Donovan Pharmaceuticals with a level of detail previously unseen. Amara spent hours preparing the witness, building their confidence and addressing fears. The human side of this case, the pain, the courage, the sacrifice was never far from her mind. On the morning of the deposition, Amara arrived early at the secure facility. The air was charged with tension. The whistleblower appeared, nervous but determined. Their voice was steady as they recounted experiences of internal resistance, corporate pressure, and moral conflict. Each detail added weight to the case, painting a stark portrait of systemic malfeasance. As the session concluded, Amara felt a surge of both relief and resolve. This was the evidence that could turn the tide. But she also knew the fight was far from over. Back in her office, Amara allowed herself a rare moment of reflection. The road ahead would be filled with legal battles, media storms, and personal sacrifices. Yet she also saw the flicker of hope, a future where accountability was possible, where justice was more than a distant ideal. Her phone chimed with a text from Marcus. "Keep shining your light. We're behind you every step." Amara smiled, heart steady. The fight was hers to lead, but she was never alone. The courtroom buzzed with anticipation as Amara Cole walked through the polished halls of the Philadelphia Federal Courthouse. Today was pivotal, the start of the formal trial against Donovan Pharmaceuticals. The weight of years of work and the hopes of countless victims rested heavily on her shoulders. She felt the familiar mixture of resolve and vulnerability that came with such moments. She passed security and greeted familiar faces among the legal team. Deputy Director Elena Ramirez was already seated, eyes scanning the room with a mixture of calm authority and sharp focus. The prosecutor, Michael Sinclair, caught Amara's eye and gave a small nod of encouragement. Their preparation had been thorough, but nothing could erase the tension that clung to the air like thick fog. As the judge took her seat, the courtroom settled into a hush. Judge Mary Ann Caldwell was known for her firm but fair demeanor. Her reputation for meticulous attention to detail and unflinching integrity brought a measure of reassurance to the prosecution team. Opening statements began, and Amara listened closely as the prosecution laid out a damning case. They described how Donovan Pharmaceuticals had deliberately downplayed addiction risk to doctors and patients, manipulated regulatory systems, and aggressively suppressed dissent within their own ranks. When the defense rose, the tone shifted dramatically. They painted the company as a victim of overzealous regulators and media sensationalism. They questioned the credibility of whistleblowers and framed the opioid crisis as a complex public health issue, not solely attributable to corporate misconduct. Amara felt her pulse quicken as the battle lines were drawn. The courtroom was not just a place for facts, but a stage for narratives. Winning this fight would mean more than proving wrongdoing. It would require breaking through layers of deception and doubt. As the trial progressed, Amara was called to the stand to testify. She recounted her undercover work, the evidence she had gathered, and the critical moments that exposed the company's true nature. Her voice was steady, but inside she fought to hold back the emotional toll the faces of victims, the relentless pressure, and the creeping fatigue. After her testimony, the courtroom erupted in hushed conversations. Amara returned to the prosecution table, her mind racing. The defense was preparing its cross-examination, and she knew they would try to exploit every vulnerability. Back in the waiting area, Amara met with Sarah Jenkins, whose son had died of an overdose. Sarah's eyes held pain and hope intertwined. "Thank you for fighting for us," she whispered. Amara reached out and squeezed her hand. "We're in this together." That night, alone in her hotel room, Amara wrestled with doubts and fears. The defense's tactics were aggressive, their attempts to undermine the case relentless. She knew this was a war of endurance as much as evidence. Her thoughts drifted to her family. Marcus had called earlier, offering support and reminding her to take care of herself. Yet self-care felt like a luxury when so much was at stake. She journaled quietly, the pen moving steadily across the page. The courtroom is a battlefield where truth must fight to be heard. Every day is a test of will. But I must remember that the fight is not just mine. It belongs to every voice silenced by greed and corruption. The following days were a blur of witness testimonies, expert analyses, and legal arguments. The prosecution presented former employees who testified about internal pressures to conceal addiction data and sales incentives tied to misleading marketing. Amara watched as the defense aggressively questioned these witnesses, attempting to paint them as disgruntled or unreliable. The courtroom drama unfolded like a high-stakes chess match, with every move scrutinized. One afternoon, Amara received a confidential briefing. Intelligence indicated that Donovan's legal team was preparing to file motions aimed at delaying the trial and discrediting key witnesses. The tactics were familiar buying time, sowing doubt, and hoping to erode public interest. She shared the news with Elena and Michael. "We have to stay vigilant," Elena said. "This is the kind of pressure that can break even the strongest teams." Amara felt the heavy truth of those words. The fight was wearing on her physically and emotionally, but retreat was not an option. Outside the courthouse, supporters of the victims gathered, holding signs and sharing stories. Media crews captured their voices, amplifying the human side of the legal battle. Amara drew strength from their presence, knowing that their courage fueled the push for justice. One evening, after a long day of proceedings, Amara found herself in a quiet cafe, nursing a cup of coffee. A stranger approached a middle-aged man with kind eyes, who introduced himself as a former pharmaceutical researcher. He shared his own story of witnessing unethical practices and the consequences of speaking out. His voice was low but resolute. "You're doing important work," he said. "These corporations don't give up without a fight. But the truth always finds a way." The encounter reminded Amara that this was a collective struggle. The fight against systemic injustice required allies from unexpected places. Back in her hotel room, she reflected on the complexity of the case. It was not just about one company or one trial. It was about challenging the structures that allowed such harm to persist. Her phone buzzed with a message from Marcus. "Keep holding the line. You're stronger than you know." The message was a balm to her weary spirit. As the trial neared a crucial phase, Amara found herself preparing for the cross-examination of the whistleblower. This was a moment fraught with risk. The witnesses' credibility would be on the line, and the defense would seek to dismantle their testimony. She spent hours rehearsing, anticipating every question, every angle. The morning of the testimony arrived with a somber weight. The courtroom was packed. Amara sat close to the witness stand, offering silent support. The whistleblower spoke with measured clarity, revealing the inner workings of the company's deception. Their courage in the face of intense scrutiny was palpable. The defense attorneys were relentless, probing for inconsistencies and weaknesses, but the witness held firm. Amara felt a surge of pride mixed with relief. This testimony was a turning point, a moment that could sway the tide. That night, she allowed herself a moment of quiet reflection. The battle was far from over, but this was progress. Her journal entry captured her thoughts. Today, truth spoke louder than fear. The fight is exhausting, but every step forward brings us closer to justice. I carry the stories of those who cannot fight, and I will not let their voices be lost. As she prepared to rest, a news alert flashed across her screen. A major political figure had publicly called for an investigation into pharmaceutical lobbying practices, citing the Donovan case as a catalyst. The storm was intensifying, but so was the resolve. Amara closed her eyes, steeling herself for the challenges ahead. The courtroom was more than a legal arena. It was a battleground for dignity, accountability, and the future of justice. The courtroom was thick with tension as Amara Cole returned to her seat after the whistleblower's testimony. The impact of the witnesses' statements was unmistakable. The prosecution's case had gained significant momentum, but Amara knew that momentum could be fleeting in a trial fraught with powerful opponents and hidden agendas. Outside the courthouse, news of the political figure's call for a broader investigation spread quickly. Reporters scrambled for interviews, advocacy groups rallied, and public opinion shifted perceptibly. For Amara, this was a welcome development, but she remained grounded. Real change required more than headlines and political statements. It required sustained pressure and accountability. Later that afternoon, Amara met with Elena and Michael in a quiet conference room. The weight of the day hung over them like a heavy fog. "We're rattling cages now," Elena said, running a hand through her hair. "The company's legal team is going to double down. Expect motions, appeals, and media spin designed to discredit us." Michael nodded grimly. "They've already started planning stories about our witnesses, questioning their motives and credibility." Amara absorbed their words, knowing they were right. The opposition was relentless, wielding resources that could overwhelm even the strongest teams. But she also knew the retreat was not an option. Her thoughts drifted to the families she represented, the parents who had lost children, the spouses left to pick up shattered lives. Their stories were the backbone of this fight. Later that evening, in the solitude of her hotel room, Amara reflected on the growing pressure from all sides. She felt the weight not only of the case, but of the expectations resting on her shoulders. The internal battle between maintaining professional composure and confronting personal fatigue was exhausting. She closed her eyes and pictured her family, the source of her strength and grounding. Marcus's steady presence, her mother's unwavering support, Sarah Jenkins' quiet courage, all reminders of why she fought so fiercely. Despite the late hour, Amara found herself drafting emails and reviewing case files, unwilling to let exhaustion claim her just yet. Her phone buzzed with a message from Marcus. "Remember to breathe. We're with you every step." She smiled softly. The simple words, a lifeline. The next day, the defense unleashed a series of aggressive tactics. Their motions sought to exclude key pieces of evidence and delay proceedings. The courtroom became a battleground, not just of facts, but of procedural maneuvering. During breaks, Amara met with legal counsel and bureau officials to strategize responses. The complexity of the trial demanded flexibility and endurance. Every victory was hard-won. Amara noticed the toll it was taking on her colleagues as well. Elena, usually composed and decisive, seemed more tense. Michael's usual optimism was tempered by growing frustration. She knew they were all carrying the emotional burden of representing justice in a case that went beyond legalities. It was about human lives and systemic failures. One afternoon, as the trial recessed, Amara stepped outside for fresh air. The city sounds washed over her, the distant hum of traffic, the chatter of pedestrians, the occasional siren. It was a reminder that life continued beyond the courtroom, but for her, the case was ever present. She pulled her jacket tighter, feeling the chill in the air, alone with her thoughts. The familiar doubts resurfaced. Was this fight making a difference? Would justice prevail in a system so often skewed by power and influence? Could she remain strong enough to see it through? Her mind flashed to a letter she had received months earlier from a young woman named Lila, whose brother had been lost to addiction. Lila's words were raw and heartfelt, a plea for accountability, for hope. Amara pulled out her journal and wrote, "Every step forward feels like walking through a storm. But in the eyes of those we fight for, the storm is worth braving. We carry their stories, their hopes, and their grief. That is our compass. Back inside." She was summoned for a meeting with the U.S. Attorney's Office. They discussed the growing public attention and the importance of managing both legal strategy and community outreach. Amara volunteered to participate in upcoming community forums and media briefings to humanize the case and maintain public pressure. She knew that controlling the narrative outside the courtroom was as critical as the legal arguments inside it. That evening, Amara joined Marcus and a small group of family members and advocates for a quiet dinner. The gathering was informal but meaningful, a reminder that the fight was collective. Marcus shared stories from his own work in community outreach, emphasizing the importance of hope and resilience. Sarah Jenkins spoke about her journey from grief to advocacy, inspiring those around her with her determination. Amara listened, feeling her resolve strengthen. The personal connections and shared commitment fueled her in ways no courtroom victory could alone. Later that night, as she prepared for bed, Amara allowed herself a rare moment of vulnerability. The exhaustion was real, but so was the fire that drove her. She sat quietly, thinking about the complex web of corporate power, political influence, and human cost that defined the case. The fight was far from over, but she was ready. Her phone buzzed with a message from Elena. "Tomorrow we face another test. Stay sharp. We're stronger together. Amara responded quickly. Always. As she lay down, the distant city lights twinkled through the window, a reminder that justice, like the night, was never truly still. The morning light seeped softly through the blinds of Amara Cole's hotel room, the quiet before the storm. Today was slated to be a pivotal day in the trial. Both sides were preparing for what could be a defining moment, the cross-examination of a key executive implicated in the company's marketing decisions. Amara sat at her desk, methodically reviewing notes, mentally preparing for the confrontation. Despite the rigor of her routine, a flicker of unease crept in. She felt the familiar tension between her calm exterior and the whirlwind inside. The weight of expectation pressed on her shoulders. Justice demanded clarity, and every question answered would shape countless lives. Her phone vibrated softly with a message from Marcus. "You're going to be brilliant. Remember to breathe and trust your instincts." She smiled faintly, the reassurance grounding her as she gathered her things and headed to the courthouse. The courtroom buzzed with anticipation as the prosecution called their witness, a high-ranking marketing executive who had overseen campaigns that minimized addiction risks. The man, David Caldwell, appeared composed, his tailored suit and polished demeanor a stark contrast to the families who sat quietly nearby. Amara observed him carefully. Years of experience had taught her to read beyond the surface, the practiced confidence, the carefully chosen words. This was a man trained to protect corporate interests. The questioning began with precision, each query designed to reveal discrepancies and uncover truths hidden beneath layers of legalese. David's answers were measured, often deflecting blame onto other departments or vague corporate policies. But under Amara's persistent questioning, cracks started to show. "Mr. Caldwell, did you personally review the internal research that indicated addiction concerns?" His eyes flickered briefly. "I reviewed summaries provided to the marketing team." "Were you aware that those summaries downplayed the severity of addiction risks?" He hesitated. "Our goal was to present information responsibly, in compliance with regulations." Amara pressed on. Yet internal memos suggest deliberate efforts to minimize adverse effects in public messaging. How do you reconcile those facts? The courtroom fell silent as Caldwell's composure wavered. Amara sensed she was making progress. Outside the courtroom, reporters jostled for updates, and social media buzzed with the trial's developments. The narrative was shifting, public attention sharpening on corporate accountability. Back in the conference room, Elena and Michael strategized on next steps. They anticipated the defense would respond with aggressive countermeasures, including attempts to discredit Caldwell. Elena voiced concerns about potential intimidation of witnesses, a tactic they'd already seen in earlier phases of the trial. Michael assured her that protective measures were in place, but the risk remained. For Amara, the personal and professional intertwined more than ever. She thought about Sarah Jenkins and the other families whose lives depended on the outcome. Each testimony was a voice for those silenced by loss. That night, Amara called Sarah. Their conversation was a blend of hope, pain, and determination. "I felt like today was a turning point," Sarah said softly. "But I'm scared. Scared they'll try to bury the truth." Amara's voice was steady. "They will try, but that's why we're here, to make sure they can't." The call ended with a renewed sense of solidarity. In the days that followed, the defense launched a media campaign aimed at shifting public opinion. They painted the case as a witch hunt, questioning the motives of the victims' families and suggesting regulatory overreach. Amara and her team knew these were distraction tactics designed to erode support. They doubled down on community outreach, organizing forums and releasing statements that emphasize the human cost behind the case. Meanwhile, Amara faced her own inner struggles. The relentless pace left little room for rest. Some nights, she wrestled with doubts. Was the system too broken? Were her efforts enough to stem the tide of corporate power? In quieter moments, she returned to her journal, writing down fears and hopes. It's not just about winning the case. It's about breaking cycles of harm, demanding accountability where silence has ruled. The fight is bigger than me. It's for everyone who can't fight for themselves. At the trial, a new witness took the stand, a former employee who had quietly raised concerns internally before being dismissed. Her testimony added weight to the allegations of deliberate misinformation. The courtroom atmosphere shifted. The defense's cross-examination was intense, attempting to undermine her credibility, but the truth had taken root. Amara noticed a subtle change in the demeanor of some jurors. The facts were penetrating the carefully constructed defenses. After the day's proceedings, Amara met with Marcus in a quiet cafe near the courthouse. The brief respite was a balm. "We're making progress," Marcus said, "but be careful not to lose yourself in this." Amara nodded. "Sometimes I feel the fight consumes me, but then I remember who I'm fighting for." Their conversation turned to strategy, to the balance between public pressure and legal precision. Back at the hotel, Amara received a call from Elena. "We need to discuss a new development. A potential whistleblower within the company has reached out." Amara's heart quickened. This could change everything. They arranged a secure meeting the next day. The whistleblower's information promised to expose internal documents showing intentional efforts to suppress evidence. As Amara prepared for the meeting, she felt the familiar mix of anticipation and caution. This was the kind of breakthrough they had been waiting for, but also a reminder of the risks involved. The next morning, the meeting unfolded in a secured location. The whistleblower, a mid-level manager named Rebecca, handed over a trove of emails and reports. Her voice trembled slightly as she explained her reasons for coming forward, her conscience, the lives at stake. Amara listened intently, assuring Rebecca of protection and support. The encounter was a reminder of the courage it took to stand up against entrenched interests. With this new evidence, the prosecution gained a significant advantage. Amara and her team immediately integrated the documents into their case strategy. The trial's next phase promised to be even more intense. As Amara prepared for court, she reflected on the journey, the losses, the victories, the moments of doubt and strength. She thought of her family, the community, and the countless lives intertwined with the outcome. Her voice steadied with resolve. "We will see this through," she whispered, "not just for justice, but for truth." The courthouse hummed with activity early that morning. Amara Cole moved through the halls with a practiced calm, the weight of the case pressing on her but never breaking her composure. Today was a crucial day, the presentation of the whistleblower evidence. This was the moment that could either crack the defenses built by Donovan Pharmaceuticals or give them a chance to regroup and launch an even more aggressive counterattack. As Amara approached the conference room where the prosecution team had gathered, she felt Marcus's steady presence behind her, his reassuring words, a steady anchor in the storm. "You're ready for this," he said quietly, sensing the quiet tension in her posture. She nodded, her mind running through the details one last time. The new documents from Rebecca exposed a clear pattern of intentional concealment. Internal emails that contradicted public statements, memos discussing ways to sideline scientific reports, and chilling references to minimizing adverse effects. The company's carefully cultivated facade was finally cracking. Inside the conference room, Elena Ramirez was already outlining the plan. We present this evidence in a way that's clear and undeniable. No room for confusion or doubt. She emphasized, we let the documents speak for themselves, but we also prepare for the inevitable attempts to discredit Rebecca, Amara added. We need to humanize the impact. This isn't just about emails and memos. It's about real people whose lives were shattered by these lies. Michael Sinclair, pacing thoughtfully, chimed in. We'll call Rebecca to testify. Her courage in coming forward will speak volumes, but we'll need to prepare her carefully. Defense will try to paint her as disgruntled or unreliable. The team worked seamlessly, coordinating every detail with a focus sharpened by weeks of relentless pressure. Every step was deliberate, every move a piece in a larger chess game against a corporate giant. As the morning wore on, Amara found a quiet moment alone in the hallway. She pressed her hand to the cool marble wall, grounding herself. The question that had haunted her these past weeks resurfaced. Was justice truly possible in a world where power so often overshadowed truth? Her thoughts drifted to her father, who had instilled in her the belief that standing firm on principles was never easy, but always necessary. She remembered his words about the strength that came from integration, not just of mind and heart, but of professional and personal resolve. A soft voice interrupted her reverie. It was Sarah Jenkins, her eyes tired but resolute. I just wanted to say thank you, Amara, for everything, for fighting when so many gave up. Amara smiled gently. We're in this together. Your strength carries all of us. Sarah nodded, a flicker of hope igniting in her gaze. Later that afternoon, the trial resumed. Amara sat poised as Rebecca took the stand. Her hands trembling slightly, but her voice steady, she described the pressure she had felt, the fear of retaliation, and the moral imperative that finally compelled her to speak out. Amara watched as jurors leaned forward, captivated by the genuine courage in Rebecca's testimony. Cross-examination was brutal. Defense attorneys questioned every detail, probing for inconsistencies, suggesting ulterior motives, but Rebecca held firm. Her integrity was a beacon amidst the storm. After the session, Amara and Marcus returned to their hotel. The silence between them was comfortable, filled with unspoken understanding. Yet beneath that calm lay the anticipations of the battles still to come. That night, Amara lay awake, thoughts swirling. Doubts mingled with determination. The personal cost was high long hours, missed moments with family, the constant scrutiny. But the stakes were too great to falter now. She penned a note in her journal. Justice is not a destination, but a journey. Each step forward is a victory against silence, against complicity. The fight is far from over, but so is my resolve. The following days brought a whirlwind of activity. The prosecution continued to dismantle Donovan's defenses piece by piece. Amara's team coordinated with victim advocates to keep the public informed, ensuring the human stories behind the legal battles remained front and center. Yet, the defense retaliated with fierce vigor. New allegations emerged attempting to question the legitimacy of the investigation itself. Anonymous tips suggested misconduct, and media outlets splashed headlines designed to sow doubt. Amara faced each challenge with grace, her inner dialogue a constant reminder of what was at stake. They can try to break me, to silence the truth, but the voices of the victims, the families, the forgotten, they give me strength. One evening, as the courthouse emptied and shadows stretched long across the city, Amara met with Elena and Michael to review a critical piece of evidence, a whistleblower report detailing a cover-up that implicated several regulatory officials. This changes everything, Elena remarked. If we can prove collusion at that level, it not only strengthens our case but opens new avenues for accountability. Michael nodded. We have to tread carefully. The stakes just got higher, and the opposition will stop at nothing. Amara felt the gravity of their words. The journey had evolved from a single corporate trial to a battle against systemic corruption. Despite the mounting pressure, Amara found solace in moments with Marcus, their conversations a blend of strategic planning and quiet reflection. You're doing what few have the courage to do, Marcus said one night. Remember to take care of yourself, too. She smiled softly, grateful for his presence. This fight isn't just for others. It's for me, too, for the kind of world I want to live in. As the trial neared its climax, the courtroom drama reached fever pitch. Closing arguments loomed, and every detail mattered. Amara spent hours rehearsing her final presentation, weaving together facts, testimony, and the profound human cost into a narrative that would resonate. On the eve of the closing statements, she sat by the window, gazing out at the city lights. The silence was a stark contrast to the turmoil inside. Her thoughts wandered back to that fateful flight, the viral moment that thrust her into the spotlight. What had begun as a confrontation marked by racial prejudice had blossomed into a movement for justice far greater than she ever imagined. The integration of her personal strength and professional skill had not only sustained her, but transformed the fight. She whispered to herself, "No matter what happens, this is only the beginning." The courtroom was unusually still as the jurors filed back in after their deliberation. The air seemed thicker, heavier, as if everyone inside sensed the gravity of what was about to unfold. Amara Cole sat upright, hands folded in her lap, her expression a carefully guarded mix of calm and anticipation. All the weeks of investigation, testimony, and relentless pursuit of truth had led to this moment. Marcus sat beside her, his presence a quiet reassurance. He leaned in slightly and whispered, "Whatever happens, you did everything you could." She gave a small nod, but kept her eyes on the judge's bench. The judge's stern gaze swept the room before calling the court to order. The foreperson rose and spoke in a clear, measured voice. "We, the jury, find the defendant, Richard Donovan, guilty on all counts." A collective intake of breath rippled through the room. Some faces showed relief, others disbelief. But Amara felt a profound release deep inside. Justice, long delayed, had finally been served. She exhaled slowly, the tension draining from her shoulders, replaced by an overwhelming sense of responsibility. This verdict wasn't an end, but a call to continue fighting. For every victim, for every family that still bore the scars, for the future yet unwritten. As the courtroom emptied, reporters swarmed. Cameras flashed, microphones thrust forward, eager for sound bites and headlines. Amara navigated through them with measured words, emphasizing accountability, the importance of systemic change, and the courage of those who spoke out. Later, in the quiet of the hotel, Amara sat with Marcus and Elena, reflecting on the trial's outcome. "This verdict sends a message," Elena said. "But the real work begins now, ensuring the reforms take root, preventing future tragedies." Amara nodded. The whistleblower evidence and the exposed regulatory corruption had opened doors to broader investigations. The fight against pharmaceutical malfeasance was far from over. She thought of Rebecca, whose bravery had tipped the scales. There was an unspoken gratitude between them, each woman drawing strength from the other's resolve. That evening, Amara received a call from Sarah Jenkins. Her voice was raw but resolute. "Thank you for giving us justice, for not letting his story be forgotten," Amara replied softly. It's the victims who have the real courage. I'm honored to stand with you. As the days passed, the media spotlight shifted from sensational headlines to deeper conversations about accountability, corporate ethics, and regulatory reform. Amara participated in panel discussions and spoke candidly about the personal toll of the case and the importance of integrating empathy into justice. Still, the shadows lingered. The defendant's appeals were expected, and Donovan's network of influence remained a potent threat. The systemic corruption was embedded, its roots tangled in political and financial power. One morning, as Amara reviewed case files at the field office, a new message caught her attention, an anonymous tip suggesting irregularities in a federal oversight agency tied to the case. The pattern was familiar, chillingly so. She shared the information with Elena and Marcus. "The fight isn't over," Amara said quietly. "It never really is." Marcus placed a steady hand on her shoulder. "And neither are you." That night, Amara wrestled with exhaustion and the creeping weight of uncertainty. Her journal became a refuge. Justice is a journey without end. Each victory reveals new battles. The path is lonely, but illuminated by the truth we carry. The following week brought a surprise visit from a group of victims' families. Their faces bore the marks of grief, but shone with gratitude. One woman, whose son had lost his battle with addiction, spoke with fierce determination. "This verdict gives us hope, but it also reminds us of the work ahead." Amara listened, humbled by their resilience. Their stories fueled her resolve to push for lasting change beyond the courtroom. In quiet moments, she found herself reflecting on her own journey. The viral confrontation on that flight, the threats, the personal sacrifices all had forged a new understanding of strength. It was not just about standing firm, but about embracing vulnerability, connection, and the messy complexity of truth. One afternoon, Marcus and Amara walked through a nearby park, the city's skyline rising in the distance. They spoke not of the case, but of hope and healing. "Sometimes I wonder," Marcus said, "if the world will ever change fast enough for those who need it most." Amara looked at him, her eyes steady. "Change is slow, but it's real, and we're part of it." She thought of her father's lessons, the legacy of integrity and compassion he had left her. The integration of personal and professional identities had not only made her a better agent, but a more whole person. Later, as she prepared for bed, her phone buzzed with a message from Elena. "We have another lead on the regulatory front. I'll brief you tomorrow." Amara's heart steadied. The journey was far from over, but she was ready. For every step forward, there is strength behind us, she thought, and the courage to keep walking. The weight of the verdict still lingered in Amara's mind as she returned to the quiet routine of the FBI field office. The courtroom drama was over. The headlines had started to fade, but beneath the surface, a darker, more intricate battle was unfolding. She had long known that winning the case against Richard Donovan was just the beginning. The true challenge was dismantling the entrenched systems that allowed such corporate malfeasance to flourish unchecked. Her day began with a briefing from Elena Ramirez. The deputy director's expression was grave as she laid out the latest developments. "We received credible intelligence about potential interference within the federal oversight agency that monitored Donovan Pharmaceuticals," Elena said. "There are indications that some officials may have accepted bribes or been otherwise compromised to slow investigations and suppress damaging evidence." Amara absorbed the information with a quiet intensity. The familiarity of such tactics was unsettling, but not surprising. Years in the Bureau had taught her that corruption often thrived in the shadows, hidden behind layers of bureaucracy and influence. "Have we identified any individuals?" Amara asked. Elena shook her head. "Not yet. Our cyber and financial teams are digging deeper, but whoever is involved knows how to cover their tracks." Amara felt the familiar stirrings of determination mixed with frustration. This means our fight isn't over. Donovan was just one piece of a much larger puzzle. She paused, reflecting on the case's arc from the viral confrontation on that flight to the courtroom victory, and now this new front. Each phase demanded a different kind of strength and vigilance. Marcus joined the conversation, having been brought in as a trusted advisor. "This is where your personal connection to this case becomes invaluable," he said. "You understand better than most how deep these networks run and how personal loss fuels the pursuit of justice." His words reminded Amara of the many faces behind the statistics: the families shattered by addiction, the communities left reeling. It was their courage and pain that propelled her forward. The office buzzed with activity as the investigation expanded. Analysts pored over data, tracing money flows and communication logs. Legal experts prepared for potential new cases that could arise from the emerging evidence. The scope was daunting but essential. In the quiet moments between meetings, Amara found herself revisiting the journal she kept during the case. Writing had become a sanctuary, a place to explore her inner conflicts and reconcile the personal with the professional. Justice is never simple. It demands not only evidence and law, but empathy and resilience. It requires confronting uncomfortable truths about the system we serve and the world we inhabit. That afternoon, she received a message from Sarah Jenkins. "There's a rally planned for next week, calling for stronger pharmaceutical regulations. Families want you to speak. They see you as a symbol of hope." Amara hesitated. Public appearances were draining, and the recent trials had taken their toll. Yet, she understood the importance of lending her voice to the cause. "Tell them I'll be there," she replied. "This fight is bigger than any one case." As the week unfolded, Amara prepared her remarks carefully, balancing legal prudence with heartfelt conviction. On the day of the rally, the city square was filled with families, activists, and advocates. Signs waved, chants echoed, and stories were shared, each one a testament to the devastating impact of unchecked corporate greed. When Amara stepped up to the microphone, she felt the weight of those stories pressing upon her. Her voice was steady but filled with emotion as she spoke about the journey that had brought them there, the victories won and the battles ahead. This case was never just about one man or one company, she said. It is about a system that allowed greed to overshadow human lives. It is about accountability at every level, from the boardroom to the halls of government. We must demand transparency, integrity, and above all, compassion. The crowd responded with heartfelt applause, their energy a reminder that the fight for justice was a collective endeavor. Back at the office, Elena approached Amara with a new development. "Our investigation into the oversight agency uncovered documents linking several high-ranking officials to offshore accounts. We're preparing to present this evidence to the Attorney General." The news was a breakthrough, but Amara knew the road ahead would be perilous. Powerful interests would resist, and the backlash could be intense. That evening, she reflected on the personal cost of the case. There had been threats, invasive scrutiny, and moments of doubt. Yet through it all, her family had been her anchor. A call from Marcus brought a moment of solace. "I'm proud of you, Amara," he said simply. "Not just for what you've done professionally, but for who you are. Your strength lies in your heart." She smiled softly, grateful for his unwavering support. "We'll keep fighting for those who can't." As night settled over the city, Amara sat by the window, watching the lights flicker below. The path was uncertain, but she was resolved. Justice was not a destination, but a journey, one that demanded courage, integrity, and the willingness to stand tall in the face of shadows. The morning light filtered softly through the blinds as Amara entered the field office, her mind already swirling with the gravity of the new information brought to light overnight. The documents Elena had mentioned revealed a tangled web of financial maneuvers designed to shield illicit transactions from public scrutiny. This was the hidden architecture that had protected Donovan Pharmaceuticals for years, allowing deception and negligence to thrive beneath the surface of regulation. Her steps were steady, but inside, a quiet storm brewed. Every piece of evidence unearthed was a reminder of the lives devastated by this systemic betrayal. Faces of families she had met, grieving mothers, lost children, and silent communities flashed through her mind. The weight of their stories was a solemn charge she carried with unwavering resolve. Helena was already waiting for her in the conference room, a stack of printed reports organized with precision. The forensic accountants confirmed multiple transfers to offshore accounts connected to shell companies controlled by officials within the oversight agency, she explained. These funds were funneled through complex layers to mask their origin. It's clear this was a coordinated effort to obstruct justice. Amara nodded, her expression unreadable, but her thoughts racing. What's our next move? We're preparing a detailed dossier for the Department of Justice and the Senate Oversight Committee, Elena replied. This could trigger hearings, maybe even criminal indictments. But we have to move carefully. We're up against powerful people who won't go down without a fight. The room was filled with a solemn energy as the team discussed strategies. Amara listened to legal counsel lay out the steps for ensuring the evidence held up under intense scrutiny and political pressure. It was a delicate dance, balancing urgency with prudence. Despite the professional calm she projected, Amara wrestled with her own internal conflict. The broader implications of the investigation unsettled her. This wasn't merely about exposing corruption, but about challenging the very structures that shape power in their society. The realization brought a mixture of hope and fear. Later, alone in her office, she took a moment to breathe and reflect. The glass window overlooked the city skyline, a reminder of the many lives intertwined with the fate of justice. Her thoughts drifted to her childhood, to lessons from her parents about integrity and courage. Those values had been her compass through every hardship. The phone rang, breaking her reverie. It was Sarah Jenkins. Amara, I just wanted to say thank you. Sarah's voice was soft, but filled with gratitude. Your work has given so many families a voice. It means more than words can say. Amara smiled. Thank you. Sarah, I couldn't do this without the strength of people like you. Your stories are the heart of this investigation. The conversation lingered, a rare moment of connection amid the whirlwind of legal battles and public scrutiny. Sarah's courage inspired Amara, fueling her determination. As the day progressed, the office received an influx of calls and messages from advocacy groups and legislators. The case had become a lightning rod for broader discussions about corporate accountability and regulatory reform. Amara felt the shifting tide's hopeful momentum mingled with the resistance of entrenched interests. At noon, Elena pulled her aside. There's a private meeting scheduled with the Attorney General and senior DOJ officials. They want your input on how to proceed, especially regarding potential indictments of regulatory officials. Amara nodded, knowing this was a pivotal moment. The path forward could redefine the landscape of justice and corporate responsibility. Before heading to the meeting, she paused to review her notes. Every detail mattered: the victim's testimonies, the financial trails, the political implications. She was acutely aware that her recommendations would carry weight far beyond the immediate case. In the conference room, the atmosphere was charged with tension and expectation. The Attorney General, a composed woman with a reputation for tenacity, opened the discussion by emphasizing the importance of integrity and transparency. Amara spoke clearly and thoughtfully, balancing legal realities with moral urgency. We have uncovered a systemic failure that allowed these crimes to continue unchecked. To restore public trust, it's essential that accountability extends beyond the corporation to include the regulatory bodies that were compromised. She outlined the evidence meticulously, advocating for a comprehensive approach that included criminal charges, legislative reforms, and enhanced whistleblower protections. The room listened intently, some nodding in agreement, others exchanging cautious glances. The conversation was frank and complex, weighing the risks and benefits of aggressive prosecution versus political pragmatism. Afterward, as Amara left the building, she felt the gravity of the moment settling over her. The fight for justice was evolving into a broader battle for systemic change. Back at her apartment, she allowed herself a quiet moment of introspection. The line between her professional identity and personal convictions blurred as she contemplated the sacrifices and victories ahead. Her phone buzzed again, this time with a message from Marcus. "Keep your head up. We're with you." That simple affirmation reminded her she was not alone in this fight. In the days that followed, the investigation intensified. New leads emerged, and the team worked tirelessly to prepare for what lay ahead. Media scrutiny increased, with reporters probing for every angle, some sympathetic, others skeptical. Amara found herself navigating a complex public landscape, balancing transparency with discretion. Her calm and measured presence became a beacon for those seeking justice amid the noise. Yet, beneath the surface, the pressure mounted. Threats and subtle intimidation tactics surfaced, designed to destabilize her focus. But Amara met each challenge with unwavering resolve, drawing strength from her family's support and the memories of those she represented. One evening, as she prepared for bed, a familiar voice echoed in her thoughts. Her father's words about courage and integrity resonated deeply. "True strength," he had said, "comes from standing firm in your principles, even when the path is hardest." That night, Amara dreamed of the family she had met, their faces filled with hope and pain intertwined. She awoke with renewed purpose. The path was uncertain and fraught with challenges, but the fight for justice was far from over. The weight of the investigation pressed heavily on Amara as she arrived early at the field office. The morning air carried a faint chill, a subtle reminder that the fight ahead would test every ounce of her endurance. Her colleagues were already gathering, papers spread across tables, conversations low but urgent. The atmosphere was charged full of cautious hope and grim determination. Elena approached with a furrowed brow, her eyes reflecting the same mixture of fatigue and resolve Amara felt inside. "We've just received a new batch of documents from an anonymous source," she said quietly. "Financial audits, emails, internal memos. The level of detail is staggering. Whoever this is, they know exactly what to look for." Amara took the folder, leafing through the pages. There were names and dates, coded language hinting at meetings held behind closed doors, decisions made to prioritize profits over patient safety. Each line was a puzzle piece, revealing the depths of deception that Donovan Pharmaceuticals had orchestrated. "Are we certain of its authenticity?" Amara asked, her voice steady despite the urgency building in her chest. Elena nodded. Preliminary verification by cyber forensics suggests it's legitimate. We're coordinating with DOJ cybercrime units for a full analysis. But this could be the smoking gun we need to expose the entire network. The realization stirred a quiet fire within Amara. For months, they had fought on many fronts: courtrooms, media waves, bureaucratic labyrinths, but this was the first tangible glimpse into the core of the conspiracy. It validated the countless hours spent chasing leads and listening to heart-wrenching testimonies from victims' families. As the team mobilized to analyze the new data, Amara retreated briefly to her office to collect her thoughts. Sitting by the window, she watched the city awaken below. The mundane rhythm of everyday life played out far removed from the legal and moral battles unfolding in conference rooms and courtrooms. Her mind wandered to a conversation she had with her mother weeks ago. Sometimes, the world seems indifferent to the suffering of the many, her mother had said softly, but change begins with the courage of a few who refuse to look away. That thought grounded her now. The invisible systems of power were relentless, but so was she. The door opened quietly, and Marcus stepped inside. "You okay?" he asked, his voice low but filled with concern. Amara managed a small smile. "As okay as I can be. Every piece of evidence brings us closer. But it also reminds me how many lives were affected and how high the stakes are." He nodded, pulling a chair beside her. "You're not alone in this, Amara. Remember that." Their moment was interrupted by Elena's call for a quick briefing. The team assembled, eyes fixed on a large screen displaying spreadsheets, timelines, and a map of influence networks extending through corporate, regulatory, and political spheres. "We've mapped connections between Donovan's executives and several high-ranking officials," Elena explained. "Lobbying efforts intensified during critical regulatory reviews. There are clear indications of quid pro quo arrangements." A murmur rippled through the room. This was more than corporate malfeasance. It was a calculated erosion of public trust and safety. Amara's phone buzzed a message from Sarah Jenkins. "Family meeting tonight. We need your presence. Some of the advocates want to discuss next steps with the victim support groups." She glanced at Elena, who gave a subtle nod. Balancing professional responsibilities with community engagement had become essential in this case. The evening brought a different kind of intensity. The community center was filled with families and advocates, their faces etched with pain and hope. Amara listened as stories poured forth tales of loss, resilience, and the enduring need for justice. One mother, her voice breaking, recounted how her son had fallen into addiction after being prescribed what he was told was safe medication. "They lied to us," she said simply, tears shining in her eyes, "and no one was held accountable." Amara's heart ached with empathy. It was moments like these that transcended the legal complexities and reminded her why this fight mattered. The victims were not statistics. They were human lives, families shattered and still searching for closure. After the meeting, Amara stayed behind to speak privately with several family members. Their gratitude was profound, but accompanied by an unspoken plea. Don't let this end with a settlement. Fight for lasting change. That night, as she lay awake, Amara wrestled with conflicting emotions. The progress made was undeniable, yet the shadows of power and privilege loomed large. How many battles would still lie ahead before true justice was realized? Her thoughts drifted to the confrontation on the plane months ago. The viral moment had been a turning point not only for her case, but in awakening a broader conversation about prejudice, power, and accountability. A small voice inside her whispered doubt. Was the system capable of transformation, Or was this merely a temporary victory before the old ways reasserted themselves? The dawn offered no easy answers, only the resolve to continue. The next day, a new challenge emerged. Media outlets had caught wind of the anonymous documents, sparking a wave of coverage. Some praised the investigation, others questioned its motives, painting it as a politically motivated attack. Amara found herself navigating interviews and press briefings, carefully balancing transparency with legal caution. The scrutiny was intense, but it was also a testament to the case's growing impact. Back in the office, the team doubled down on security protocols, threats, both overt and subtle, reminded Amara that this battle extended beyond courtrooms. Her relationship with Marcus became a source of solace and strength. Late nights spent reviewing documents were softened by shared memories and quiet moments of reassurance. "Don't let the noise drown out the truth," he would say. "The world needs you to be the voice for those who can't speak." In the midst of the chaos, Amara maintained her focus on the victims, their stories fueling her unwavering commitment. One afternoon, a new piece of intelligence arrived. An informant within Donovan Pharmaceuticals was willing to cooperate. The prospect of insider testimony electrified the team. Amara met with the source under tight security, her demeanor calm but attentive. The insider's revelations painted a chilling picture of deliberate suppression of safety concerns and calculated misinformation. Each new detail deepened the case's complexity and the stakes involved. That evening, Amara faced a moment of introspection. The line between professional duty and personal conviction blurred further. The burden was heavy, but so was the purpose. She recalled her father's words about integrity and courage anchors in a turbulent sea. With renewed clarity, Amara embraced the truth that this fight was not just about legal victories, but about transforming a broken system for the future. The sun had barely risen over Philadelphia when Amara arrived at the federal courthouse. The city's streets buzzed with the usual weekday energy. But inside the building, the air was thick with anticipation. Today was more than just another step in the Donovan investigation. It was the moment the entire system would be put to the test. As she walked through the halls lined with marble and history, Amara could feel the weight of every case that had passed before these walls. Today, her case was part of that legacy, a fight for justice in a world too often tilted by power and privilege. Her phone buzzed quietly, a message from Eleanor ready for the hearing. "The team is waiting." Amara took a deep breath and sent back a brief reply. "On my way." Inside the courtroom, Judge Harrison presided with a calm authority that commanded respect. She had built her reputation on fairness and unyielding integrity. Her presence signaled to all involved that this proceeding would not be taken lightly. The hearing opened with formalities, the reading of charges, confirmation of legal representation, and review of the evidence gathered. But the true significance lay in what was to come, the introduction of new testimony from the confidential informant. The courtroom doors opened, and a young man entered, flanked by federal marshals. His eyes flickered with a mixture of fear and resolve. Amara recognized the moment for what it was, a reckoning not only for Donovan Pharmaceuticals, but for the countless individuals who had suffered silently for years. The informant took the stand, voice steady despite the tension. "My name is David Turner. I worked in Donovan Pharmaceuticals' Research and Development Department for 6 years. I witnessed firsthand the deliberate decisions to downplay addiction risks in internal reports. I'm here to tell the truth." David's testimony peeled back layers of deception that no document alone could fully reveal. He described meetings where executives overruled scientists' warnings. He spoke of manipulated studies and suppressed data designed to maintain sales momentum at any cost. Each revelation sent ripples through the courtroom and the public gallery. Family members of victims, seated nearby, held hands tightly, their eyes shining with a mixture of grief and hope. Amara watched them and felt a surge of determination. This was why she had endured so much their courage and the hope that justice would finally be served. Outside the courthouse, the media frenzy was in full force. Cameras flashed, microphones hovered, and reporters pressed for statements. Amara remained guarded, knowing that every word spoken now could shape public perception and the case's trajectory. Later, she met with Elena and the legal team to strategize the next moves. The evidence was compelling, but Donovan's defense was already mobilizing to cast doubt, attacking the informant's credibility and highlighting procedural technicalities. "It's the usual playbook," Elena said with a weary sigh. "Question the witness. Delay proceedings. Sow confusion." Amara nodded, understanding the battle ahead would not only be in the courtroom, but also in the court of public opinion. That evening, Amara returned to her apartment, the familiar silence a contrast to the day's intensity. She poured herself a cup of tea and sat by the window, gazing out at the city lights. Her mind drifted to the families she had met, their pain etched into every word and glance. The responsibility felt heavy, but also sacred. A knock at the door broke her reverie. Marcus entered quietly, carrying 2 takeout containers. "Thought you might need some company," he said, setting the food down. They ate in comfortable silence before Marcus spoke. "You've come a long way, Amara. From the confrontation on that flight to here. I'm proud of you." She smiled softly. "It hasn't been easy. There are moments I wonder if it's worth it." Marcus shook his head gently. "It is. Because you're not just fighting for yourself or your career. You're fighting for all of us, for those who don't have a voice." His words resonated deeply. The battle was bigger than any one person. It was about justice, dignity, and change. Over the next few days, the investigation intensified. Amara balanced the relentless demands of casework with moments of personal reflection. The emotional toll was undeniable, but so was the resolve to see it through. During a late-night phone call with Elena, they discussed the upcoming media briefing planned to update the public on the latest developments. "We have to be transparent but cautious," Elena said. "This case has the power to influence policy and public trust. We must handle it responsibly." Amara agreed, mindful of the delicate balance between revealing truth and protecting the integrity of the investigation. The media briefing was held in a packed conference room. Amara stood before a sea of cameras and reporters, her voice calm but firm. "We are committed to uncovering the full truth behind the practices of Donovan Pharmaceuticals," she stated. "This investigation is about accountability and justice for the victims and their families. We ask for patience and trust as the legal process continues." The response was mixed. Supportive voices applauded the progress, while others questioned motives and raised concerns about potential political interference. Back at the office, Amara found strength in her team and family. Each small victory, each new piece of evidence, reinforced their collective purpose. One afternoon, a new challenge arrived unexpectedly. A high-ranking executive from Donovan Pharmaceuticals requested a private meeting to discuss potential settlement terms. The proposal was strategic, an offer of significant financial compensation paired with strict confidentiality agreements. It was designed to halt further investigation and silence the growing public outcry. Amara faced a profound ethical dilemma. Accepting could provide immediate relief for some victims, but might also compromise the broader pursuit of systemic change. She sought counsel from Elena and Marcus, weighing the implications carefully. "It's a test," Marcus said, "of your integrity and commitment." "What will you stand for?" Elena added. "Justice is not always neat or fast. Sometimes it's messy and complicated, but your decisions will shape the future." After nights of reflection, Amara made her choice clear. She would continue the fight not just for financial restitution, but for full accountability and meaningful reform. In a press statement, she reaffirmed the commitment to transparency and systemic change, acknowledging the complexity but emphasizing the need for lasting justice. The battle was far from over, but with every challenge, Amar grew stronger, her quiet resilience a beacon in the storm. Her journey had transformed her not only as an agent, but as a person, deepening her understanding of justice, empathy, and the power of unwavering courage. The following morning dawned gray and drizzly, a perfect reflection of the storm Amara felt brewing inside her. The news of Donovan Pharmaceuticals' attempt to buy Silence had leaked, stirring up a fresh wave of media scrutiny and public debate. The court of public opinion was relentless, and Amara knew the stakes had never been higher. She arrived early at the FBI field office, greeted by the familiar hum of busy agents and analysts who were laser-focused on the case. But behind the efficiency was an undercurrent of tension. Everyone understood that this case was no longer just about a single corporation or even one man. It was about the integrity of the justice system itself. Elena was already there, reviewing new intelligence reports. She looked up as Amara entered and gave her a small, encouraging smile. "Ready for another day in the trenches?" Amara nodded, though the weight on her shoulders felt heavier than ever. "They're trying to spin this as a settlement win, but we know it's more complicated." Elena agreed. "The media is quick to simplify everything into sound bites, but our job is to hold to the facts and keep pushing forward." As the morning briefing began, Amara took a moment to center herself. The team outlined their strategy to counteract the disinformation and reinforce the message of transparency and justice. Public trust was fragile, and any misstep could unravel months of painstaking work. During the meeting, a message arrived from the Department of Justice. A high-level official requested a confidential update on the investigation's progress and upcoming court motions. The implication was clear: political pressure was intensifying, and the higher-ups wanted control of the narrative. Later that day, Amara found herself alone in the conference room, reviewing testimony transcripts and financial documents. The complexity of the case was overwhelming. Layer upon layer of corporate deceit revealed a system designed to protect profit at the expense of human life. Her phone buzzed. A text from her mother. "Grace, thinking of you today. Remember, you carry our family's strength." Amara smiled faintly, grateful for the reminder. Her family's legacy was woven into her identity, grounding her amid the chaos. She typed back, "Thanks, Mom. I need that today, despite the heavy workload." Amara allowed herself a moment of introspection. She thought back to the confrontation on the plane, the viral video that had threatened her career, but ultimately fueled her determination. That moment had forced her to confront her own vulnerabilities and redefine her sense of self. She recalled the sleepless nights wrestling with doubt and fear. Was she strong enough to face the powerful forces aligned against her? Could justice truly prevail in a world so deeply flawed? But each time she considered giving in to despair, a quiet voice within reminded her of the reason she became an agent, to stand for those who could not stand for themselves. Later in the afternoon, Elena joined her in the conference room. "We have a new witness," she said, "a former marketing executive willing to testify anonymously. She claims she was pressured to withhold critical safety data from doctors. Amara's eyes narrowed with interest. Another piece of the puzzle. Let's prepare her for court carefully. The coming days would be a whirlwind of interviews, depositions, and legal maneuvering. Amara's role extended beyond investigator to protector and advocate for those risking everything to speak out. One evening, after a long day of meetings, Amara sat alone in the break room, sipping black coffee. The exhaustion settled deep into her bones. She closed her eyes briefly and let herself feel the full weight of her responsibility. A knock at the door startled her. Marcus stepped in, holding 2 steaming cups of tea. Thought you could use a break. They shared a quiet moment, the simple act of companionship offering a balm to her weary spirit. I worry about you, Marcus said gently. This case is wearing you down. Amara nodded. It is, but I can't stop now. So many depend on this. He reached across the table and squeezed her hand. You're not alone in this. We all have your back. That support was the lifeline she needed. The case was bigger than any single person, and together they would weather whatever came. The next morning, Amara arrived at the courthouse to face a packed courtroom. Donovan's legal team was ready with aggressive tactics to discredit witnesses and muddy the waters. During cross-examination, Amara could see the frustration in the faces of family members and supporters. The fight was raw, personal, and exhausting. She caught a glimpse of Elena across the room, nodding in quiet encouragement. The day wore on with moments of tension so thick they could be cut with a knife. Amara fought to maintain composure, driven by the faces of those who had entrusted her with their stories. That night, alone in her apartment, Amara stared out the window at the city skyline. She allowed herself a moment of doubt. Was the cost of integrity too high? The emotional toll, the isolation, the constant battle against entrenched power. But deep inside, a spark of determination burned. She thought of the families, the lost lives, and the possibility of real change. Her phone buzzed again. A message from Elena tomorrow is another battle. But remember, every step forward is a victory. Amara took a deep breath, steadied herself, and prepared to face whatever came next. She was not just fighting for justice in a case. She was fighting for the soul of a system that too often favored the powerful over the vulnerable, and she would not back down. The courtroom buzzed with anticipation as the trial entered its critical phase. Amara arrived early, dressed in her usual professional attire, a navy blue suit that conveyed quiet authority without arrogance. Today was the day they would present the testimony of their key witness, the former marketing executive whose revelations promised to shatter the carefully constructed facade Donovan Pharmaceuticals had maintained for years. As she entered the conference room with Elena, she noticed the tension in the air, thick and palpable. The legal teams were already assembled, their eyes sharp and calculating. Amara's pulse quickened, but she maintained the calm exterior she had perfected over years in the bureau. The executive, Evelyn Harper, was escorted in discreetly, shielded from the press frenzy outside. She looked nervous but resolute, the weight of her decision to come forward evident in the slight tremor of her hands. Amara took a moment to offer a reassuring smile. This was more than a testimony. It was an act of courage, a breaking of silence that could change everything. The hearing began. Prosecutors introduced evidence that detailed how Evelyn had been instructed to suppress data indicating the addictive potential of Donovan's flagship opioid medication, internal memos, emails, and meeting recordings painted a disturbing picture of corporate greed that placed profits above human lives. When it was her turn, Evelyn spoke with measured clarity. She described the pressure she faced, the ethical dilemmas she wrestled with, and the eventual breaking point when she realized silence was complicity. Her words were a stark reminder of the human cost hidden behind corporate walls. Amara watched closely, noting the subtle shifts in the courtroom. Some jurors leaned forward, their faces hardening with the gravity of the truth unfolding before them. Donovan's defense attorneys countered fiercely, attempting to undermine Evelyn's credibility by highlighting inconsistencies and questioning her motives. Throughout the cross-examination, Amara felt a familiar tension rise within her. The courtroom was a battlefield where every word mattered, every expression could tip the scales. She knew that beneath the surface of this legal contest was a deeper struggle, a fight for accountability that transcended the individuals involved. After Evelyn's testimony, the court adjourned for the day. Outside, the media swarmed the courthouse, hungry for any detail that could feed the growing public fascination with the case. Amara avoided the crowd, slipping into a quiet corner to collect her thoughts. Her phone buzzed. A message from her mother. "Proud of you. Keep standing tall." The simple words grounded her. The journey that began with a viral confrontation on a plane had led here to this moment where truth and justice were poised to collide with power and privilege. Later that evening, Amara sat in her apartment, reviewing the day's transcripts. Fatigue pressed heavily against her, but so did a fierce determination. The case was far from over. There were more witnesses to prepare, more evidence to analyze, and more battles to fight. She paused and allowed herself a rare moment of vulnerability. The isolation of her role sometimes felt suffocating. The unyielding pressure to be perfect, to embody strength while suppressing doubt, was a heavy burden. Her mind wandered to the families she had met, the mothers who lost children, the spouses left to pick up shattered lives, the community still reeling from the epidemic. Their stories were etched into her soul, fueling her resolve to see this through. Her phone rang. It was Elena. "Amara, are you okay?" The concern in her voice was genuine. "I'm managing," Amara replied. "Today was tough, but necessary. We're close. This testimony is a turning point. The jury is hearing what they need to hear." Amara smiled softly. "Thanks for being in my corner." Elena's voice was steady. "Always. You're not alone in this." The call ended, leaving Amara with a renewed sense of purpose. She knew the road ahead would be grueling, but she also knew that truth had power, especially when wielded by those willing to stand firm. The next morning, the atmosphere in the courtroom was charged with intensity. The defense team launched a fierce rebuttal, calling expert witnesses to challenge the validity of Evelyn's claims. Amara listened intently, prepared to counter every attempt to distort the facts. When the prosecution called Amara to the stand, the courtroom fell silent. She spoke clearly and confidently, articulating the investigation's findings with precision. She described the meticulous evidence gathering, the corroboration from multiple sources, and the undeniable pattern of corporate misconduct. Throughout her testimony, Amara felt the weight of responsibility more keenly than ever. She was not just representing the Bureau. She was speaking for every victim whose voice had been silenced. Cross-examination was relentless. The defense attorneys sought to exploit any hint of uncertainty, to paint her as biased or overzealous. But Amara's calm demeanor and thorough preparation allowed her to navigate the onslaught with grace. Outside the courtroom, supporters gathered, sending messages of encouragement that bolstered her spirits. The struggle was bigger than one trial. It was a battle for the soul of justice. That night, Amara sat alone once more, reflecting on the journey. She knew the final verdict would not come quickly. Trials of this magnitude dragged on, with twists and turns that could shake even the strongest resolve. Yet, beneath the exhaustion, there was a quiet hope. The truth was breaking through the shadows, and with it came the possibility of real change. Her phone buzzed again, a message from a victim's family. "Thank you for fighting. You give us hope." Amara's eyes filled with tears she didn't try to hide. This was why she endured the faces behind the case were her true motivation. She closed her eyes, feeling a profound connection to the legacy her family had passed down, the courage to stand firm, the wisdom to seek justice with compassion, and the strength to carry on even when the path was steep. Tomorrow would bring another day of trial, another chance to hold power accountable, and Amara Cole would be ready. The final morning dawned with a fragile calm, the kind that settles before a storm breaks or a great reckoning unfolds. Amara woke early, the quiet of her apartment a stark contrast to the turmoil swirling in her mind. Today was the day the jury would deliberate, the day months of painstaking work, heartache, and confrontation would culminate in a decision that could reshape lives and reverberate far beyond the courtroom walls. She dressed deliberately, choosing a simple yet dignified outfit, a charcoal gray suit that reflected her solemn purpose. Looking in the mirror, she saw not just an agent of the Bureau, but a woman who carried the legacy of her family, their values etched into her very being, strength tempered with compassion, courage born from loss, a relentless commitment to truth. Her phone buzzed with a message from Elena. "Whatever happens today, I'm proud of you. We've moved mountains." Amara smiled softly, the support a balm against the pressure. She knew the fight was far from over. Even a verdict in their favor would be just one step in a long road toward healing and accountability. At the courthouse, the atmosphere was thick with tension and anticipation. Reporters jostled for position outside, while inside, the courtroom held a hushed reverence. The judge called the session to order, her voice steady and resolute. The jury entered, faces unreadable, but eyes alert. Amara watched with bated breath as they took their seats. The foreperson stood, clearing their throat. "We, the jury, find the defendant, Richard Donovan, guilty as charged." A ripple of shock and relief passed through the room. Amara's heart swelled with a mixture of triumph and solemn responsibility. Justice had been served, but the journey was not just about a verdict. It was about the countless lives affected by the opioid crisis and the systemic failures that had allowed such devastation to unfold. Donovan's expression remained composed but unreadable. His legal team exchanged glances, recognizing the gravity of the moment. The judge addressed the court, acknowledging the significance of the verdict. This decision represents more than just the outcome of this trial. It is a message that no one, regardless of wealth or power, is above the law. It is a step toward healing for the families and communities harmed. Outside the courtroom, Amara was met by a gathering of victims' families. Tears flowed freely as they embraced one another. Their grief mingled with a newfound sense of hope. Amara stood among them, humbled and honored to be part of this chapter in their lives. Later, she met privately with Elena and other members of the investigative team. They shared quiet moments of reflection, aware that their work had exposed dark truths, but also illuminated a path forward. Amara's phone rang. It was her mother. "We heard the news." Audrey's voice trembled with emotion. "You did it. You brought justice." Amara's voice cracked slightly as she replied, "It was all of us. The families, the team, the truth. This is just the beginning." The months that followed saw significant changes. Donovan Pharmaceuticals faced sweeping reforms mandated by the court. New regulations were enacted to ensure greater transparency and accountability in the pharmaceutical industry. Whistleblower protections were strengthened, empowering insiders to speak out without fear. Amara remained at the forefront of the continuing investigations, driven by the faces of those she had met, the mothers, fathers, children left behind. She understood that justice was a living process, not a single moment in time. She also carried with her the lessons learned from this journey. The integration of her professional resolve and personal strength had transformed her approach to her work and her life. No longer compartmentalizing, she embraced the whole of her identity: agent, daughter, sister, advocate. One quiet evening, Amara sat on her apartment balcony, the city lights flickering below like distant stars. She reflected on how a single moment of courage, the flash of an FBI badge on that turbulent flight, had set in motion a chain of events that challenged injustice and sparked change. Her phone buzzed with a text from Eleanor, ready for the next fight. "Because we are." Amara smiled, feeling the familiar fire of determination. The road ahead was long, filled with challenges and setbacks, but also with the promise of progress. She took a deep breath, grounding herself in the knowledge that the fight for justice was never solitary. It was a shared burden, a collective mission. And as dawn broke over the city, Amara Cole stood ready not just as a federal agent, but as a symbol of resilience and hope for those who dared to demand a fairer, more compassionate world. This journey has shown us the deep scars that discrimination leaves not only on those directly targeted, but on every one of us who believes in fairness and respect. Amara's quiet strength reminds us that confronting prejudice is not easy, especially when it comes wrapped in power and privilege. Yet, it is through courage and unwavering conviction that true change begins. We must remember that every act of kindness, every stand against injustice, chips away at the walls built by hate and fear. This story is a call to recognize the humanity in each of us, to challenge the systems that allow discrimination to persist, and to honor those who fight for a better tomorrow. If this story touched you, moved you, or made you think, please like this video, share it with your friends, and subscribe to our channel. Your support helps us bring more stories that matter, stories that spark empathy, inspire action, and keep the conversation alive. Stay with us for the next chapter, because the fight for justice continues, and every voice counts.